What's up?
Is this close enough?
Yeah, that's close
Okay.
enough. That's fine. Okay, so this episode will be somewhat of a continuation of where we left off with last episode because we talked about your healing story, your birth journey with the birth difference between our first and our second. So we'll get into our third and get into emotional things as it relates to symptoms. But the frame of this episode is like, I guess rather than an AMA, ask me anything, it's ask us anything. So AUA.
Yeah.
At least that's how we framed it. So that's what we're going to do. So do you have anything you'd like to start with?
Yeah. No, that sounds good. I feel like there was, within the first episode, it was more so focused to just like what you said on me. But now I want to focus on us.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like there was so much context missing that we weren't either ready to talk about or
it's just the reality that it's so hard to know where to go with all that we've been through.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like we've had it way worse than other people. That's not what I'm implying. It's just that we've been through a lot. Like we lived in the hood, that there was gunshots everywhere. We had.
Did we talk about that in the first one?
I don't even know if we talked about that in the first one.
But we've been together for half our lives.
Yeah.
So since we were 16. And the amount of things that we have, like the amount of deaths and rebirths that our relationship and as individuals that we've endured is literally insane.
Yeah.
But also, what do they say? Like the most stressful things in a marriage or in somebody's life is like a move, a divorce, a death, having a child. And we averaged a move every 6 months for the first how many years of our marriage?
I don't know. This is the longest we've ever lived somewhere.
Your parents
2.5 years.
Got divorced.
Yep.
I
mean, aside from my grandpa and your grandma, those are major deaths. But
right. But also, in a metaphorical sense, we've died several times.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'm not even the same person I was last week or this morning.
What happened in the last week?
Just, you show up as a different person every single day.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying like something major happened. I'm like, what? I'm trying to think.
Well, pregnancy will do that to you for sure.
Yeah, I was like, what the hell happened in the last week that is major that warranted like
I don't know. I disassociated this whole time.
The hell happened?
It's my favorite thing to do.
Okay. We'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Just kidding. Kind of.
Okay. So, yeah, again, we'll frame this as an AMA, and that'll naturally get us towards other topics that relate back to all that stuff, probably. And I guess like what we're alluding to, we're not intentionally being dodgy. It's just that there's so many details. There were a lot of familial stuff. There was a lot of familial stuff that occurred that I have discussed briefly on some episodes. That was really challenging, that then led to Kylee and I's relationship being rocky for a little bit, that then led to us being stronger than we've ever been afterwards upon healing and addressing all those things.
Well, it's hard to just note, to touch on that, is like when you get married to somebody, not only did I know you since I was 16, so I already knew what I was getting myself into, or did I? And then we got married and, shit hit the fan with your family, so to say. Yeah. And sorry, not going to...
No, it's the truth. That's what we were referring to with like a lot of familial things happened.
And
total blow
we
up
were
of
so
my
young.
family.
We had zero boundaries of our own little family. And so much stuff happened. And looking back, it was like, what was that? It was like a really bad train wreck. But along the way, we've just had to kind of just deal with it privately, whereas there's some other family members who are very vocal about some things, and that's not our style. And because we weren't so vocal about things, I'm sure there was a lot of assumptions made about certain things, but I don't know, kind of coming to a more mature spot or place to where we can discuss those things. And family situations are very delicate matters, but at the same time, like, hey, I know this is your family, but I married into this family and now it's my problem too.
Yeah. And I did a bad job protecting because I was very enmeshed with that.
Well, you couldn't see, but we also didn't really know what was going on.
No, we had no clue what was going on. So, I mean, okay, we can't say all that and be like, all right, now to the AMA. So we might as well just jump into that first and then go into the AMA.
Well, because also too, it's trailing off of the first podcast because of a lot of what we were experiencing was a lot of why I was having a reoccurrence or resurgence of symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I guess we can start there. So we trailed off on the last podcast, if I remember correctly, and that's episode 69, which I'll link in the show notes.
69?
I mean, I did that intentionally in a very like funny way.
Grow up.
You thought it was funny?
I did.
Okay. So, yeah, we left off with how we started to understand the terrain perspective after moving out of a house in Oklahoma into a better house and how you gave birth. So I don't think we talked about the experience of living in the hood. And some of this, like, I don't want to get into all the details just because I don't want to personally be taken as like blaming or anyone.
I hear you.
You know what I mean? Like, I just want to share openly what happened, what we've learned from it.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Totally.
So we were living in Oklahoma just after you gave birth to our second and had what I consider to be one of the most empowering moments I've ever witnessed in my life because, and I know it was for you too, where you pull our daughter up out of the water after being told by a traditional OBGYN that this is going to be potentially catastrophic. And you said, F that. And I'm going to go with this midwife at a birthing center, which was literally just a house, and give birth in a bathtub. And you pulled our daughter out of the water yourself, looked at her, looked at me and said, I did it. And the cutest part about that is that our daughter, Charlie, when she does something exciting that, you know, she's very proud of, she'll turn to us and go, I did it. Yeah. Yeah. So it's the first words that she heard and like imprinted in her. Anyway, so just after that though, some more background context. We were living in a different house in Oklahoma because we had moved out of the previous one, which was incredibly toxic, moved into this new house.
We were in the hood.
Was in the hood. Like our neighbors were legitimately meth dealers.
Had tattoos, not to like stereotype, but they had tattoos on their face and neck and like fully covered and like they're intimidating looking.
Yeah. Well, it's the context, right? Because like I have friends who have tattoos on their face, but it's not. I mean, it's
there was two freaking old ladies that would go in and out. They look like innocent
we would
old
see
ladies.
Like 12 cars going in and out a day, and that was super sketchy. And then we had multiple shots fired in front of our house a few days
at
after
like
moving
10 a.m.
in. Well, no, I'm talking about a few days after moving in, and then the police came, and there was a bunch of police cars, and I was trying to figure out what was going on, and they basically notified us that yes, we found a bunch of drugs in the house, and there's graffiti and vandalism everywhere, and this was in what was presumably a very quiet neighborhood in Lawton, Oklahoma, but unfortunately, right as we moved in, these meth dealers had started doing what they were doing in the house right next door to us.
It's all that
to say, it was insane. So there's a lot more details there, but we had shots fired outside our house all the time. So it was obviously like an unsafe environment. It felt incredibly unsafe. So we did what we could to get out of that situation immediately. Moved in with my mom in Kansas City. And that's where
I was like 3 months postpartum.
You were 3 months postpartum. And that's where we began to see my childhood and just some of the dynamics between my mom and my dad in a completely different way than we had before. And I've discussed a little bit on this podcast.
And we don't have to go into details.
We don't need to go into all the details.
Long story short, it's like, in retrospect, we learned the hard way that we needed boundaries for ourselves individually. And for our relationship / marriage and for our children. Yeah. And we allowed, there was active trauma unfolding in front of us every day. Yep. And so our nervous system really took a hit. And we allowed so much to happen. And the adults in the situation, I mean, clearly we are adults too, but we were very young. This was actually happening during our Saturn return. I'm not like a huge astrology person, but our Saturn return is when you're 29, turning 30, and a lot of things come up for you that are no longer working in your life. And then that's when it was like, whoa, leading up to this moment, we're going to learn the hard way, whether you want to or not. The boundaries between family is so necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, and what we also learned in that, or I guess I'll speak for myself here, and you can say what you learned individually as well. Maybe yours was like people pleasing and not 100%. Wanting to set individual boundaries and not wanting to step on toes. And it's a, you know, understandable thing because you married into a family, you had very good relationships with these people. You want to be in good light as the daughter-in-law. It's totally understandable. But what I learned personally is how enmeshed I was with my mom, how my identity was wrapped up in my mom's identity to the degree that, or let me explain that a little bit. So growing up, a lot of the fights that my dad and I would get in, and not all of them, so I want to be clear, like I'm not blaming anyone, but a lot of the fights that my dad and I would get in, and I'm talking about like physical altercations or things like this, would stem from my mom and him having gotten in a verbal argument, and then my mom coming literally in some cases and standing behind me as her and my dad are in the midst of an argument, sort of posturing that, you know, I'm her defender.
You're supposed
in a way
to protect her.
Yeah, and like one example, and I can share some of the details of this. Before my dad went to rehab when I was 13, he had already moved out of the house, and she and my dad had been getting in an argument over the phone based on something. And I don't remember all the details, nor do I know, but I know that my mom sort of, I won't say convinced me, but for lack of a better term, convinced me to stand at our front door with a baseball bat and not let my dad in the house.
Home.
Yeah. So,
and you were how old?
I was 13. I was 13 at that point. And then when my dad went to rehab, for that entire time, I was the one spending, and this was as a 13, 14-year-old, I was the one spending many nights, days, holding my mom, making sure she was okay, consoling her, and not the other way around. So all that to say, like, and I don't want people to feel bad for me. I've done a lot of work on that stuff. It's more that my self-worth was already severely diminished. My sense of security was basically inextricably linked to my mom's mood. So that if my mom was upset, I didn't feel safe, so I had to fix and make her feel better. If my mom felt better, or if my mom was okay, then I felt okay. And I always felt that I had to fix. So I was like a surrogate father, surrogate husband for her growing up in many ways. And you witnessed a lot of that when you came into the picture when I was roughly a sophomore in high school. And there was still a lot of that prevalent. All that to say, leading up to what happened in early 2021, virtually all of 2021, because we lived there in her house for 6 months and then moved out, and it was just a big mess. And ultimately, to sum that part up, again, we're seeing a different sort of take on my childhood. We're seeing things in a different light, not to excuse anything that my dad had done when I was younger, but also seeing that it does take two to tango and, you know, our experience living with her. And also, you know, when she decided that, because she's the one who initiated it, that she doesn't want to speak to us anymore, which was a huge traumatic instance where she abruptly locked the doors on her house and didn't allow us to come in, and finally admitted the reason is because we have a relationship with my dad. And I want to touch on that a little bit. In early 2021, my dad apologized for everything that he had done when I was younger. And it came at a time when I was incredibly afraid of authority because I was speaking out about what's going on in the world while I was still in the Army. And The Guardian, a mainstream news source, had just written a hit piece on me and contacted the Army Public Affairs Office. And I was a few weeks from getting out. I was worried I was going to be labeled as like an insider threat because God knows what could have happened.
We just had a baby.
We had just had a baby. We had just moved, like all this stuff. I had moved you guys because I wanted to get you out of that unsafe environment, but I was still having to show up to work in Oklahoma. I'd moved you and our kids into my mom's house in Kansas. But all that to say, my dad, right when I'm having this fear of authority come up, calls me, and that was an authority figure that I was scared of when I was younger, and apologizes for everything that he had done to me when I was younger. So we initiated a relationship with my dad, and my dad and I now have the best relationship we've ever had. He shows up as a dad. He shows up as a grandpa. He's hands-on with our kids. Like he's awesome. Like I love my dad. I truly do. And I know you do too.
And changed behavior.
Yeah.
And consistent changed behavior is what means more to me than, like, okay, you could say you're sorry all day long, but when you have the behavior and actions to back it up, that's when you're like, okay.
Yeah. And I hope I'm explaining this clearly. This is hard because there's so many.
There really is.
There's so many
There really
little
is
things.
So many pieces that a lot of things have to be left out, not only for just like delicate family matters, but also it's just too much.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Right.
And honestly, this topic is still really scary for me to talk about, because
my mom has an online presence.
She does.
She does. And she talks about it openly all over the place.
She talks about it openly and from her point of view and her perspective.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And it is very different, and that's her reality, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's her subjective experience.
That is where I have had to come to accept and acknowledge myself. I'm not always going to have to be right. I don't have to prove, even though everything that you see, and this is true, I think, for anybody who has an online presence, what you see on the internet is not who they are in real life. Most of the time.
A lot of the time.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's not that I am scared of, I mean, maybe I am scared. I being pregnant with each subsequent pregnancy, I have learned more boundaries for myself, for my family, and that has been the most beautiful thing about pregnancy. Because I'm not going to lie, my pregnancies are really rough. But they have taught me to really embody this mama bear, like, we're not going to do that. We're not. And that is like where I've had the most growth is because I have allowed people to walk all over me my entire life. And for the longest time, I was like, why did I attract this situation into my life? Like, I would question, like, why
did I deserve this? Right? Yeah.
Why?
I mean, fuck, my family's dynamic was crazy.
A lot. Yeah. I mean,
but our little family is good and we're doing it a different way.
Yes.
Which is a gift.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because now we get to see our kids and be like, no, we're not doing it this way. And have the balls to have the, but the boundaries to be like, you're not going to talk to my kid this way, or we're just not going to have this relationship right now because it's unhealthy. As painful as it is.
Totally.
And the more boundaries you have, the smaller your circle gets. And it's not that it's got to be this huge, erratic, like, F you, even if you're my family. It's just like, this is just not healthy. And it is what it is.
Setting a boundary and saying, and I want to finish the thought that I had because I never rounded out that thought earlier on, like what happened. Well, I'll finish that. But there's setting a boundary that is like a staunch hardline boundary, which doesn't resonate with me. And I think you would agree with that. If someone is willing to sincerely apologize and then show difference in behavior, or at least show attempted difference in behavior, because
or acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Apologize, make amends, and then like show attempts at improving behavior and be willing to reflect.
The other thing I do want to make note on, for the record, and I don't fault you because this is the truth. Yes, although your mom was the one that was like setting the boundary to first, like, oh, I no longer want to talk to you guys, cut you off.
Yeah.
even though it was my idea to reintegrate with your dad in the first place.
Well, can I
yes,
finish
but
that?
I'm just also wanting to point out the fact that although it was her idea, it's not like in a way where we're like victim, like, oh, she just doesn't want to be with us or talk with us or associate with us anymore. It's actually a very healthy boundary on both ends.
Yeah.
Because we cannot agree on reality and how things went down. And I'm not even talking about their whole marriage that fell apart that we should have had nothing to do with in the first place because we were the kids.
Yep.
We were fully enmeshed in a situation.
This is back in 2017 for context.
We were fully enmeshed in a situation that we had no business being a part of.
Yep.
And your relationship with your father is your business and should not be dictated by other people. But unfortunately, that's been used as leverage. The kids were used as leverage.
Yeah, let me round it out because we're kind of jumping around too much, and then I want to like move on to what we learned from this. I know you briefly touched on that. So essentially, my mom locked us out of her house abruptly, and then I got on the phone with her and her life coach, and she basically admitted that the reason she was locking us out of her house abruptly because we had a relationship with my dad, and then that triggered in me severe abandonment wounds, severe mother wounds, tons of shame and guilt that I dealt with for quite some time. Now, I want to give a little bit of background context for that, then get into like the journey of having to reconcile some of that stuff.
And how that affected our relationship.
Totally. So, like I said, mom ultimately cut me, my wife, and kids off because I have a relationship with my dad. In a few months prior to that, 6 to 8 months prior to that, she had, and I'm just sharing this because there is a lot of narratives out there. My mom, like I said, has a social media presence, and I just want to share my perspective. And this is the one time I'm doing it. I don't make it a point to share it each and every day, that's not my identity, but I just wanted to share my perspective on this because I've had countless people ask, you've had countless people ask, and I just want to like put this on the record. So in May of 2021, all this transpired, by the way, in roughly like the falling apart in November, December 2021, and then January, February 2022. So in May of 2021, my mom invited my dad over for Mother's Day dinner so that we could reintegrate with my dad for the first time. She's the one who initiated that. And we were
the whole family was there.
Yeah, everyone was there. We were starting to reintegrate as a family after what was a rocky divorce that I don't have to, I don't want to get into the details on because that would derail the conversation. It's not my place. But we reintegrated with my dad. This is just after my dad had also apologized to me profusely and started wanting to show up as a dad, which was incredible. And I'm like, absolutely, that's all that I require is that you apologize, you acknowledge, and then you make amends in your behavior. And that's what he was doing. So we all reintegrated with my dad. Then fast forward a few months, I host the Health Freedom for Humanity Symposium in Kansas City in front of 650 people, 26 speakers over the course of 2 days. That's a story in and of itself, that whole symposium. But my mom got on stage and pointed to my dad in the audience and said, he is no longer my husband, but he is my life partner. We're showing the world a different way to do divorce. And everyone applauded her on saying that. Again, we had already been reintegrating with him as a family. And then that weekend, we took family pictures with my dad, in the pictures with all of us. And then suddenly my mom decides to abruptly, and again, I say this with emphasis, without any difference in behavior coming from my dad. Again,
there was no change.
Showing improvements in his behavior, if anything. My mom just abruptly decides to cut him off, which is her prerogative.
Like I was going to say, and that
is her prerogative.
Totally her decision, her boundary. And if she wanted to do that, that's totally fine. Where I have my issue is that because we did not follow suit, we were then excommunicated when it was her idea in the first place to reintegrate.
Right. So
then we were essentially punished for not following her mind changing.
Yeah, exactly. So we were on the way to the property and she locked us out and admitted on the phone, like I said, that she was cutting us off because we have a relationship with my dad, which again, like my relationship to my dad is mine and my mom's relationship to my dad is hers. And ultimately that's what led to the departure of our relationship with my mom. And now I don't want to get into any more details on that necessarily unless they come up naturally in the flow of the conversation. I want to more so discuss like what that taught. So for me, like I said, that triggered an incredible emotional abandonment wound, severe feelings of unworthiness in myself, and what is, the typical mother wound, and that came with a lot of shame and guilt. And that had a severe impact on our relationship for some time, because I admittedly for the following months, but over the course of a year and a half, would have lots of ups and downs in my mood. And there was also a lot of stuff going on, like Health Freedom for Humanity, completely falling apart
at the same time.
A lot.
We were moving across from Kansas to Texas.
Yep.
Your job was essentially
we were financially
up in the air.
Yeah, we were in financial
$5 in our account.
Yeah, literally $5 in our bank account.
Literally, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So security all around was crumbling.
Yep.
And I also want to state that, like, although, and we could get into this when we move more into the relationship, but this kind of ties back into why I got into this relationship or was attracted to this whole family dynamic in the first place. Like, your mother wounding and my wounding were a perfect match. And so
I had both. I had mother and father.
100%.
Yeah, I did.
I think to a degree, I'm not ready to really go there yet. I there was a lot that happened within my childhood that, one, I don't even remember, but also contributed why I got sick in the first place.
Yep.
And that was just the dynamics that it was. But, coming to adulthood and being like, oh, that is not normal, or, things like that. But what you were saying is that your mother wounding and how much that really affected our relationship, which it did, but I would say it was the catalyst to both of our expansion individually.
Yeah.
Because it was a toxic cycle, because you were triggering my abandonment wounds.
Yeah. Because I had
a father in the military,
right.
So of course I was attracted to somebody who was emotionally unavailable. And I was probably communicating in a way that was very triggered as well. Our triggers were triggering each other. Yeah. And we got to a point where it was so toxic. And like, ironically, and this is so weird how things happen in cycles, it was during our 7th year itch that they say. And it was all the timing of, that cycle. And a lot of the focus of the growth, I would say, not to be like, oh, you were more effed up than me or anything by any means, but you went through an immense amount of stuff that we're not going to cover here, but like, you should be a drug addict. Like, the things that you've endured as a person is like unnatural.
As a child.
Unnatural, but also as an adult.
I know, but I would say primarily as a child.
Yes. And it was coming out within our marriage, as it typically does. And that's how generational trauma unfolds.
Yeah.
And we had the opportunity to really sit, and that's when we learned to really have to give each other the time and space to be like, okay, is this my shit or is this your shit?
Yep.
And can we come together? Sorry, I have a potty mouth. Is this my stuff or is this your stuff? How much is it? The other person within the partnership needs to be like, you're right. This is my stuff, and own up, have the ownership. I will say, like, a lot of it was focused on your mother wounding because that was dictating a lot of the relationship. But at the same time, I will say it was a beautiful opportunity because obviously relationships are mirrors. And so it was showing me within me, okay, where do I need to detach from this and not live and die by everything my husband says and does, and really break the chains of codependency and really find within me what it was showing me within the relationship within myself and how that affected my ability to be a partner and a mother and how that all fit within our family dynamic.
Yeah, I think it was a really good catalyst for both of us to learn to take individual responsibility for our own emotions and our own experiences, not project them onto each other. And we're not
It was
perfect.
Really, really
it was really hard. Yeah.
Because there were times, sorry, I'm just going to get into this.
I don't care.
There were times where, because of the wounding that, and the dynamic that it was, and that the programming that you had, it was really, really hard for you to hear anything I had to say.
Totally.
Because it was the mother wounding, and so you would witness me as either your mom, and you would interpret everything as an attack or defense, which also my delivery is very Sagittarius style.
Yeah. I'm a Cancer.
Alec is a water sign, a double water sign, and I'm a double fire sign, which I think is actually really good for our masculine and feminine dynamics. But I digress. It was really challenging. Yeah. It was really challenging because I'm like, whatever I need Alec to learn about the dynamics of our relationship, it's not going to be learned through me because he can't hear me or see me in this moment in time. And things really changed after your water fast. Yeah. That was like, strip it down, faced with, I think you had the ability to actually have true insight and have like one of those pivotal moments where you're like, oh, this is how it really has deeply affected me.
Yeah, I had full clarity, like talk about eliminating the voices, so to speak, and just being by yourself and not having any input of food or anything like that, not working much and being out in nature. You really just have God's input and your own input and really have time to analyze your psyche. And that's why I've talked about so many times on this podcast how impactful my extended water fast was for me. And it wasn't even physically that impacting. It was more so spiritually and emotionally impactful because it gave me time to truly reflect and listen to myself and listen to God. And it gave me full clarity on how much, like I had already come to understand this at this point, how much I was enmeshed with my mom and how much unworthiness and shame and guilt had been impressed upon me throughout my life. But then I think after that, because I dissolved so much of that, I was able to show up and hear you and receive you person. So much better. And I'm not perfect, but so much better than I was before. Like I could show up and actually listen to you, give me feedback, and give you that container of openly sharing your experiences and not immediately be triggered into shame and be like, oh, I'm a piece of shit and worthless. Because
it was a vicious cycle that we were stuck in. It was a vicious cycle.
I mean, I give myself grace because of what I've been through, and simultaneously, like, motherfucker, I'm an adult. I have a wife and 2 kids. So like, it's both. It's both that you can acknowledge what you've been through, but that doesn't mean you can just perpetuate this. Oh, I've been through this. That's why I can't hold space for you. It has to be both. Yeah. And that's what I think kind of hit me during my water fast. It felt like an initiatory experience for me. And it really was. It was like a men's initiation. I felt like I became more of a man. And I've said this before to you. I look at pictures of me prior to my water fast and pictures of me afterwards. And I feel like I look more like a man and less like a boy after my water fast.
The Mulan song just started playing in my head.
Oh my God. But the larger point is I cultivated a sense of internal worthiness finally. On my water fast, and realized how much my worthiness, at the very least in the past 2 years, had been tied up with my mom.
And it's so funny too, because the whole timing surrounding the water fast, like, as it was so much needed for both of us. Yeah. And part of me was like, go on, get. Yeah. Like, I'm mad at you. Get out. Shoot. And go. I don't care. Like, I can't stand to be around you. Like, this is so, we were perpetuating the cycle so much and couldn't get out of it that I was like, just go. Like, I can't even and then the other half of me, being a dynamic woman, was like, are you just gonna leave? Yeah. You're just going to go and run
Well,
away?
it was good for you too, because it was like dissolving the codependency.
100%.
Yeah.
And it was exactly what our relationship needed.
Yeah. Because you were very much enmeshed in my emotions. And there's nuance there, because like as a man, I'm supposed to provide this security for you. Well, and I wasn't sufficiently providing that. And also we both did a horrible job of given the nature of the traumatic things that were going on, of holding space for each other to have emotions.
Yeah. Well, and we also neither of us had a third party to talk healthily about what we just experienced within the dynamics of our relationship, and what just happened with the fallout with your mom and how traumatic that was, and having 2 babies and moving. And like, we didn't seek help outside. And I think, and this is just a side note, it's really hard for me to want to open up to anybody. And it's not because I'm judgmental, but it's because the level that you and I go to in conversations in depth, like, and I'm not trying to mush everybody into a category as far as like traditional therapy, because I think some people, that's really great. Talk therapy is really great. But for me, that was not going to work. And so I just didn't seek out anybody to talk to, because I'm like, they're not going to get me. I don't vaccinate my kids, and ABCD, COVID's a fraud, and I can't open up to somebody. Although that I did, and that's a whole other part of my situation.
I don't think we have time to get into that.
No, we don't. But it does play into the fact that I was a people pleaser, and that individual who I promoted heavily really did help me close the gap on not allowing people to walk all over me anymore and set substantial boundaries. But I digress. Going back to what I was saying is that it's really hard too, because yes, I'm codependent, or I'm a recovering codependent, but understanding my human design, not that I outsource completely to that, but my entire body graph is open. I'm a highly sensitive person.
Yeah, you're not a reflector, but you're as close to a reflector as you can be.
Yes. And so I absorb everything around in my environment. Highly empathic, as I get kind of cringed out with saying that now because it's so overused, but it's true. And so there's a degree in which I take on my husband's stuff, because not only is he in my vicinity, but like I mean, we've known each other half our lives. Of course, I'm going to take on all your stuff. And so that was really, really hard to separate what was your stuff, what was mine, and really have that allowance, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a continual journey of allowing each other to have space to feel our emotions, because we don't want to suppress them, because we know that just leads to chronic issues, of which we've both dealt with now. Like I have too now at this point.
Yeah.
And also being willing to take ownership for where we may have done harm or wronged the other person. It's like a delicate balance of all those things, of giving them space to feel their feelings when triggered, also sharing your authentic expression and experience of any given situation, but not projecting your emotions onto other people.
I was just going to say, and holding my tongue. Like that's been really, really difficult for me to not, I mean, I take things personally really quickly, and that's just...
What do you mean by holding your tongue though?
Like, I don't always have to interrupt you and be...
Okay, yeah.
Oh, is that funny?
It is funny. You've gotten a lot better about that.
I have, and that's the thing, awareness, right? And really not becoming responsive instead of reactive. And that's so hard, because I feel like relationships are the biggest, like, I want to punch you right now.
I mean, it just happened this morning.
It did, right?
It happened this morning.
You don't have to get into it.
Well, it's a perfect example. And like we both acknowledged, like, oh, okay, we were able to
acknowledge.
Yeah. So just to share some of the details. First off, you're pregnant right now, You're like
30,
overstimulated.
Almost 31, 31 weeks.
Almost 31 weeks. You're overstimulated like crazy. And in the moment, I forget all these details. But then when I remember them after the fact, I can have compassion.
Yes. So, same with me.
So you're overstimulated. You have a lot going on. And
I don't look how I normally look. And so I have all these things. Thank you. I appreciate that. Gorgeous. And I know you're going to say that either way. But
I mean it though, too. But the point is, so I had told you multiple times, like, hey, I got to leave because I need to go work out before, like, I'm very, and we'll get to this later. I'm not rigid, but I do have a routine in it. I'm not rigid. We'll talk about that later. I have a routine, but I'm not rigid. But I was like, hey, I need to go work out because I actually missed my workout yesterday, talking about not being rigid. But I need to go work out today before our podcast. I need to go. And I said that 3 times. And you... Then when I'm about to leave,
I was focusing on feeding the kids.
You were
getting
exactly. You're overstimulated.
And
but right before I'm about to leave, you're like, "Hey, can I show you these outfits?" I'm like, "Kai, I just told you I have to leave," and then you got upset with me.
You don't care.
And then I felt in shame because I was like, "Well, like it's not that I don't care. It's just that I told you 3 times I gotta go." So then I got triggered into shame, and then I didn't respond well, and I said, "Like Kylee, you can't get mad at me," and I got kind of like
I know.
upset
I was like,
with
he's
you.
not gonna want to do this podcast anymore. It's
I was
gonna
like,
be
I got
awkward.
upset with you, but then able to step back and detach from that situation. And I called you and I was like, hey, I understand that you're overstimulated and you probably didn't hear me in the couple of times or didn't fully receive that I said I really needed to go multiple times. And I'm sure you're just anxious for this podcast. So I love you and we're going to have a great podcast.
Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate you having the wherewithal to like think about that because most men don't. And which leads me to my next point is that during this time, I really started looking into Alison Armstrong stuff and the Queen's Code and the precursor to that, the book before that, I think Keys to the Kingdom. And reading about those and understanding more so about how men's minds work and how they're very like one track focused, not all men, really gave me an appreciation and I was off the hook. Like I didn't have to take everything so personally. Like it's not, oh, he's not doing this because he's mad at me or he hates me. It's because this is how his brain works. Yeah. And learning that was so important to our relationship. And that's another reason why I was going to say, I hold my tongue now, like allowing you the time and space to talk without interrupting or abruptly or emasculating you.
Yeah.
Because that was also part of the dynamic.
Totally.
Was really important and something that I highly recommend women do. And there's another book, The Empowered Wife. I can't remember who off the top of my head who wrote that book, but it's also a very good book. It just kind of gives women another perspective of, okay, I can be highly influential within this relationship. And women, you do have a lot of power within the relationship. And the men really do just want to provide and please and make their wives happy. And that sounds like a weird...
It's true.
Dystopian, like, oh, mother and husband, blah, 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 blah. But if you know how to communicate with your partner because you're understanding how their brain works and vice versa... Like how you were able to step into my shoes and be like, oh, she's probably really overstimulated. Yeah. She's probably nervous and she's really pregnant and this, and that. Yeah. It really, really changes the dynamics of your entire relationship.
Totally
and I
does.
highly recommend it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like having that context to always remember I know this almost sounds cliche, but the little kid inside of that individual who went through all those things that still sometimes gets triggered by various things, that has a lot going on in their life. And whatever's happening, just remembering that context and putting yourself in their shoes and really asking, if I were in that situation, given how they are oriented, given their unique characteristics, what would I have done? Or could I see how I would have done the same thing in that position? And then it sort of takes the heaviness off and you're like, oh, okay. And that's why I called you afterwards. And I was like, hey, I'm sorry I talked to you the way that I did. To be clear, I didn't like cuss you out or anything. No. I don't do that. But I was talking to you like, Kylee, I gotta go.
And I'm highly sensitive. Yeah. And so I'm but fiery. And we're realizing Charlie is very similar. And that's why I was like, 100%
the same way.
Maybe I am kind of like Charlie, because all these things are starting to unfold with these personality developments with Charlie. And Alec keeps looking at me like, this is you. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was highly sensitive this morning. I'm also really pregnant.
Yep.
But I'm grateful that you were able to acknowledge that.
Yeah. I guess to summarize this, I know we jumped around a lot. It's learning in whatever capacity to that, yes, you've been through some things that have led to you having behaviors that are not conducive to healthy relationships, whether that's in your past, when you were a child, or stuff that's happened to you as an adult, a combination of those things that have led to you to express a certain way. But there comes a point where once you become an adult and you have the responsibility of a relationship dynamic, and then also of raising two other people, or however many other people, that you have to take ownership for that. And you can acknowledge both, okay, I have been through a lot, and sort of have empathy and compassion for yourself in that.
Now it's my responsibility.
Say, it's my responsibility to do it differently. And also say, understand that I am inherently worthy despite what other things happen to me. And it's not prescriptive. I'm not going to say like, oh, you should go do a water fast. But I think men do need some sort of initiatory experience. And a lot of men are missing that. And that's what I had that really, truly changed the man that I am. And I'm not perfect, but overwhelmingly, I'm a different person. Like, I'm a completely different person since that water fast. And I think that I'm now able to better receive you and hold space for your emotions. I'm also able to understand. And again, there's situations that happen that trigger me still to this day, but my inherent worthiness much more than I did previously. And I'm able to show up better. And I think that there are countless resources that you can look to as a man to help you with that. For me, what worked was a water fast, though.
Yeah. And then for me was doing, obviously the personal reflections of as far as like my childhood dynamics, but also really learning about how your brain was working and unhooking from taking everything so personally and being so highly sensitive, but also recognizing, hey, I'm a really sensitive person, but respond instead of react, and also I want to touch on how we address having arguments like that or disagreements in front of the kids. Because to me, the most important thing is showing how we come back together. And because we have ugly moments, obviously it's not like abusive, scary, like
hell no.
We're very, very conscious because of what we went through and witnessed, to step in the next room or be like, okay, make sure that the kids are not in this conversation, or can we step? Like, I'm highly sensitive to that. But also there are moments where we do have certain discussions that are heated. And to me, the most important thing is how we come back together in front of the kids and how we show that, hey, we still love each other very much. And sometimes we don't get along, just like Grayson and Charlie don't get along sometimes. Mommy and Daddy don't get along sometimes. But this is what happens, and we talk about it, and we still love each other very much and have, just that little conversation with the kids too.
Yeah. I think what's also helpful is that if we are frustrated, at least this is what I do. I think you do the same thing. If I am frustrated, if I am like just not feeling the best right now and needing to balance out, okay, I need to take time for myself ASAP to go feel these feelings and process these emotions, however I do that. But I also have responsibilities as a father right now. Just being open about that with 100%. My son or my daughter and say, look, I'm upset right now. Maybe explain as best I can, given what their brains can comprehend, what's appropriate, right? And explain that it has nothing to do with them, and I'm doing the best that I can, right? Like
100%.
I'm angry right now.
Because they're going to feel that, and they're going to feel the conflicting energy. Like, okay, so they're telling me that they're fine, but their energy, like especially our children, but I think all kids can sense, and this is where kids are, they're like sponges, especially before the age of 7, when they're in a different brainwave state. They're going to feel every emotion as if it's their own. And so when you say, hey, I cry and my kids freak out, I'm like, hey, it's okay. I'm crying because I'm sad or I'm really, really overwhelmed right now, but I'm okay. And it's okay to cry and it's okay to feel and identify these emotions, and also not like drag it out and be like, whoa, is me, and show them I can work through and process these emotions in a healthy way. Gives them the opportunity to learn those coping skills to be like, okay, I'm feeling these feelings and we're going to work through it, and it's okay to have these feelings. But yeah, being really upfront with where you're at, I think is so important. So these kids are not having these conflicting emotions and energies happening at the same time. Because to me, that's what's creating all of these kids' underlying anxieties and how they present when they're older, like just confusion and underlying things that they don't have insight on because they've been confused their whole life.
Most of our ancestors ate nose to tail, which means they consumed all parts of the animal, didn't waste really any of the animal, and that means that their diets were naturally rich in essential nutrients like collagen. And unfortunately, most modern diets are severely lacking in essential nutrients like collagen, which is why Paleo Valley made their 100% grass-fed bone broth protein powder. The term grass-fed today is thrown around pretty wildly. It can mean anything from 100% grass-fed to just partially grass-fed to minimally grass-fed and really primarily grain-fed. But Paleo Valley goes the extra mile to ensure their bone broth protein powder is sourced from 100% grass-fed cows. I have here in front of me the chocolate bone broth protein powder, and the ingredients in this are bones and water, organic coconut milk powder, organic cacao bean, organic chocolate flavor, organic monk fruit extract, and Himalayan pink salt. That's it. They also have a vanilla flavor, and they also have an unflavored version, but I am partial to the chocolate flavor. It tastes just like the chocolate milk that I used to have as a kid, except for it's not toxic. It's actually really good for you. I've been shopping with Paleo Valley for years. I've used their bone broth protein powder, their 100% grass-fed beef sticks, also their organ supplements, and I've found their products to be nutrient dense, high quality, natural, and made with integrity. So if you're ready to upgrade your health in just 30 seconds a day and get this essential nutrient collagen, head to the show notes or visit paleovalley.com/the way forward. And when you check out, a 15% discount will be automatically applied to your order. Experience the difference of truly natural, nutrient-dense, 100% grass-fed bone broth protein powder and so many more incredible products with Paleo Valley. At this point in history, community is essential. And as the world shifts in ways we never imagined, finding spaces that foster true connection with like-minded people is more important than ever. Join us this year for our 3rd annual Confluence Festival, May 7th through the 12th in Bandera, Texas. Confluence is a transformational gathering where a like-minded community comes together on a stunning regenerative farm just outside of San Antonio, offering the perfect opportunity to connect deeply with nature, paradigm-shifting knowledge, and one another. With multiple offerings running simultaneously, Confluence features a dynamic mix of lectures, workshops, live music, movement classes, and more, covering topics from circadian biology and consciousness to dome building and regenerative agriculture. Attendees are encouraged to CYOA, choose your own adventure, ensuring a truly personalized experience. This year, we are so stoked to welcome Dr. Diane Hennessy-Powell, a leading neuroscientist featured in the Viral Telepathy Tapes podcast series, sharing her research on the science of telepathy and expanded consciousness. Dr. Gerald Pollack will reveal his groundbreaking work on the 4th phase of water, reshaping how we understand biology and energy. We'll also be joined by Dr. Kelly Brogan, Eileen McCusick, Veda Austin, Tom Barnett, and many, many more incredible workshop leaders and lecturers. Plus, we'll have live musical performances from Lincoln Jesser, Headflux, DJ Mike Winter, Joel Raffiti, and several other incredible musicians and performers. And when it comes to nourishment, we believe food is medicine. I promise you will not find better food at any event you attend. The full-scale restaurant on-site serves farm-to-table meals with ingredients grown and raised right on the property or sourced from local farms, providing a deeply nourishing experience for both body and spirit. And our event accommodations are designed for every comfort level. Camp under the stars, stay in a cozy tiny home, enjoy luxurious glamping, or park your RV. If you prefer a hotel, we've got you covered with nearby hotel options as well. And your whole family is welcome. Our unschooling village, led by experienced guides, provides engaging activities for kids aged 2 through 12, ensuring that parents can fully immerse themselves in the experience while their little ones learn and play in a supportive environment. Come be a part of an unforgettable event surrounded by like-minded community where we gather in celebration of health, freedom, and coherence. Visit confluenceevent.com or head to the show notes to learn more and reserve your spot today. And that's actually a perfect segue, since we're already talking about parenting, into like some of the Ask Us Anything, so AUA questions. So one of the first ones was asking about our differences in parenting approach between each child. And I'd like to just share our general approach when it comes to teaching our kids to process our emotions. And I'm not saying that we're perfect. I'm not saying that Kylee and I have it all figured out. We're still learning. And I think that's actually a key thing that we tell our kids, is that we don't want them to look at us as infallible authority figures, more so guides. And we explain to them,
and
hey,
say sorry when you mess up.
Yeah, we say sorry when we mess up, and we say, hey, we're still learning too. We're not perfect. We're still trying to figure this all out, especially because...
which is not an excuse, because we're the adults, but it's just acknowledging like, hey, I'm doing my best. I'm really, really sorry I hurt your feelings.
Yep.
And acknowledging that for them.
And so this is very generally speaking, but it seems to work well. When our oldest gets triggered, with our daughter, it's a little bit different, because she's A, still young, and B, she's a little bit more...
The most strong-willed person I've
ever met.
She
is the most strong-willed human being I've ever met, and I'm not exaggerating at all. Like, our 3, almost 4-year-old came out the womb strong-willed. Like, it is... Yeah, she scares me a little bit too.
She's a 3-nager.
Yeah, I'm not worried for
her. I'm worried for the world.
Yeah, worried for the world. When having to deal with her, and I mean that in a good way, because she's very strong.
I mean, anyway, it's like what you want.
It's what you want. It's what you want in a little tiny girl.
Authority.
Yeah.
Boys. I mean, girls. She'll have boundaries for sure.
Like, I have very rarely, if ever, seen any other child at any age, let's say below teenage years, say no with such a sense of internal strength. Because yes, she does sometimes go, no, but it's more like, hey, Charlie, we do this? No.
There's no bargaining. Nope. There's no manipulation tactics that work on her.
Nothing. She's just like, no.
Like, to get her to listen.
It's almost like calmly a no, that it's like, no.
Like, she's so
certain of it. Yeah, she's so set. No.
No. Well, last night I'm putting her to bed, and this is not a proud moment, but I said out loud, I was like, I'm so overstimulated. I'm overtouched, because remember, I'm highly sensitive to my environment, and moms will get it. Like, when you're touched out, by the end of the day, I have a baby inside of me that's like ripping my body at the seams, kicking me. I love it. I would never change it. And then I have my other 2, who's 7 and almost 4, and I'm touched out. I'm done. It's past their bedtime. They're not listening. And I'm laying there, and they're fighting, and I go, I'm going to cry. And I said that out loud, and Charlie goes, well, cry then. I was like bamboozled. I was like taken aback. And it's so hard to not laugh in those moments, because I don't want to encourage that. But I was just like, touche. You know what I mean? Like, she was calling my bluff.
Yeah.
Well, then cry then. And I just am like, it's just, I love to experience, and this is what brings me back. Like, although I'm in these stressful moments with my kids, these are the moments that I'm like, this is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Because their personalities are so funny and so interesting to just learn from and use as a mirror. And they're just hysterical. And I love coming together at the end of our night and being like, oh, Grayson said this today. He asked me who was the first
That's one of my favorite parts about our night, when you and I are laying in bed, like reflecting on the things that our kids have said and done that day. It's the cutest thing.
Mind-blowingly, but hysterical moments of the day.
Yeah, it's the best. Okay, so back to how I approach if our kids get triggered or get in an argument. We do not and have not ever physically punished our kids and would not. I'm personally just very against that. And maybe you could say it's because of what I grew up exposed to on the severe end of the spectrum in terms of being physically punished. But we do set boundaries. And when it comes to emotions, we want our kids to learn that it is okay and it is actually essential to process their emotions, to feel whatever they have bubbling up. Angry. But it's not okay to project it onto another person. So the way that we handle that, and it's unique given the individual circumstances, but overwhelmingly, if our son is very emotionally upset by something, we ask him like, hey, do you have feelings that you need to feel right now? Or I see that you have feelings you need to feel right now. Do you want me to help you talk about this? And sometimes he says no, and he just wants to go to his room. We say, okay, that's totally fine. I think it's best that you go to your room right now and just feel these feelings as best you can. If you if you need us, call on us and we'll come help you and talk. And
he usually comes out when he's ready, because that's when he'll find blocks or Legos or something in there to regulate.
Yep.
And then he'll come out and be like, okay, I feel better, Mom. Like, I can't tell you how many times. I mean, honestly, this kid is just very intelligent.
Right. And we're not banishing him to his room or anything like that. It's
that's
like,
where
you must
he
go to
feels
your room.
like
it's like
the safest to process.
Yeah, exactly. We've just made his room like, hey, this is your space. If you are feeling very emotional, it's not a timeout, then let's go process your emotions.
But I also want to be clear in the fact that we're not like so laissez-faire, like I feel like within the parenting culture these days, people have swung so far on the other end of the spectrum to be just totally hands off, where these kids are having lack of boundaries. And it's not like it's a respect thing, but it's a safety thing where they don't feel safe within their environment of who's the adult, which kind of mirrors like you're teetering on the fence of parentifying the kid because they are left to fill in the gaps.
Right.
And they're not old enough yet. They need the guidelines to feel safe within their environment.
Totally.
And I'm not talking dictatorship.
No. I'm
talking firm boundaries to where they feel safe. And I feel like it's been an interesting journey between parenting between Grayson and Charlie, not only because we've matured and gone through more things, but also because they're different individuals and require different parenting styles.
Totally.
Kind of. I mean, I wouldn't put our parenting styles in categories per se, but we did try the conscious parenting, like, let's really talk this out. And we still, to an extent, do talk about feelings for sure and acknowledge them, but we're not going to like, well, let's talk about this and fester and victimize this whole situation, because that's when you forget about giving these kids the tools they need to process them and move on.
Yeah.
Because that's life.
Yep.
And giving them those actual tools.
Yeah. And I think with Grayson specifically, our son, and this is my assessment, you correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I think he is a little bit more emotional than our daughter is. And
100%.
When it comes to things, we have to be a little bit softer in tone with him, like much more aware of how we're coming across. Than with Charlie, we have to be a little bit more assertive and firm and stern with her.
And she's strong-willed.
She's extremely strong-willed. And we love that about her, obviously. But like with Grayson, again, we help guide him to his room where we say, it's totally fine that you're upset. Let's just like scream into a pillow if you need that. Or if you need to talk to me about it, I'm here to talk about it. Let's talk about it. That's totally fine. And then after you've processed this, then come back and you can go to, whether it's his sister that triggered him or you or whatever it is, and then have that conversation after you've reflected and processed your emotions related to it. And then sometimes I ask him at the end of that, do you need a hug? Do you need a hug?
Yeah.
And I think that's like a really important thing. And then also,
because then it gives him bodily autonomy
Yep.
to be like, okay, what do I need? It gets him thinking of like, what do I need in this moment? But also like boundaries, setting his own body boundaries of like, no, I don't need that right now. Or yes, I do need that.
And then we don't force it if he doesn't need it. And then the other thing I'll say too, just on the general parenting approach, when our son does something that is perceived as bad, right? Like something bad that he isn't supposed to do. I've established a thing with him that I say green, and I'm like, Grayson, if you need to tell me something that is very hard for you to tell me because you're worried that I'm going to get upset, you say green, and I will not get upset with you. And I always reaffirm that, dude, you can tell me anything, and no matter what, I will always love you. You just tell me. I'd rather you just be honest with me about it than be too afraid to tell me. Especially because in my childhood, I was exposed to a dynamic that I was so afraid of failure. I was so afraid of failure that led to me withholding things my whole life. And that's not a safe dynamic to be around. It's
interesting too, though, like how our kids are so much like us in the fact that they've inherited things like that already. And although like us as parents are trying to undo those things, and ironically, they're mirrors for us, like, oh, wait, I do this. Or like Grayson had a trouble at school because people were walking all over him. And we're like, why? How did he learn to be such a people pleaser and let people walk all over him? Oh, hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
Right.
And using those moments as mirrors for sure. But it's hard when you're working almost uphill because it's like, and that's fascinating topic and conversation. That's just kind of like a different avenue, is how these certain characteristics show up in our children, even if they weren't purposely or outwardly shown. Does that make sense? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
like the perfectionism.
Yeah,
like I would never want Grayson to feel like he had to draw a perfect picture.
We've never made him outwardly, expressly feel like he has to be perfect anyway. In fact,
he already has that.
He already has an inherent perfectionism about him, and whether it was passed down energetically because 100%. That's you and I have struggled with that, or if it's something that's just the constitution of his soul. Because you see the difference between our son and daughter. They're literally completely different people, and they've been raised overwhelmingly exactly the same outwardly.
For the most part,
For the most part, really, they have.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how they are unique. So they do require different parenting styles, and that's where.
Well, and Charlie's still really young too, so still kind of allowing these, in acknowledging like, okay, this is age appropriate for her to have these type of meltdowns, but also still trying to show her at the same time the coping mechanisms to get through those feelings, but also still saying, hey, you can be mad, but I can't let you hit me.
Yeah.
Or I can't let you bite.
Right.
She's a biter.
Yeah, she's a biter. And she's gotten better about that, but she'll sometimes just like scream at the top of her lungs and clench her fists and yell if she's really upset. And we're like, okay, you can't do that. It's okay to do that. I will literally
be like, hey, no screaming in the car. And she'll go, ah.
Yeah, on
and
purpose.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, no, it's funny. And again, we're always learning as parents too. The other thing that I will say is that our kids are a very, very big mirror, and I think this is the same for all other parents. I know we touched on this a little bit, but when you or I or both of us are not emotionally regulated, we immediately see it,
behavior.
Especially in our son, I would say, totally. See emotional dysregulation in our son. And it's a perfect example, as challenging as it is for us to have to look at, okay, are our kids acting out because we are not feeling the feelings that we need to, or we're suppressing, or we're like perpetuating this negative emotion.
Yeah.
And that's usually what it is.
Yeah.
And I will say that overwhelmingly our kids are really good, especially because we've gotten a lot better about that.
At regulating.
We've gotten a lot better about regulating our own emotions. But just to close the loop on the emotional thing, I think by naturally from the get-go, telling them that it's fully okay to feel the feelings that they feel, while also simultaneously helping them understand it's not okay to project those feelings onto other people. And again, helping them understand there's a difference between telling someone, hey, what you did upset me, versus screaming at them or yelling at them or trying to get back at them and things like this. Just those things alone, I think, have made it so our son, who is inherently very emotional, can be much more emotionally regulated. And again, he, like any other kid, is not perfect. He's still learning. That's the process of becoming, maturing as a child. But overwhelmingly, that has been very effective, that we help him go to a space where he is comfortable to express however he wants, so that he's not projecting onto other people, so that he really feels those feelings. And then he can come back into the dynamic that triggered him in the first place, a little bit more regulated, and fully express, hey, this bothered me. Here's why that it bothered me. And not project that onto whatever the scenario was of the individual that led to him being extremely triggered and emotional.
Which brings me to my next point, why it's extremely important for us as parents to be regulated, or I guess not regulated as the wording is present,
right,
and aware, because alongside relationship problems, parenting is my number 2 biggest trigger, because they are the mirror.
Yep.
Like, why is this kid's meltdown right now so overwhelming to me? Oh, because maybe I wasn't allowed those emotions to be expressed as a kid, or, just as an example. But it is so quick. And I'm just saying this because we're not perfect, because there are times where, things happen that are out of our control, like, which I think would be a good segue into technology and allowing our kids screen time and what that looks like, and EMF.
Can I make one more quick parenting point, though? The other thing that I think we do a really good job of, and I don't remember where we learned this or why, but it kind of just makes intuitive sense to do it this way. I grew up being told, you will do this because I told you so, all the time, right? Because I'm the boss. We explain why. We help our kids understand why.
Yeah, but like, I was just saying that, like, especially to Charlie.
Yeah.
Because she'll have a meltdown, or you can tell they're about to be like, they're about to unleash. And it's like, but let me tell you why we have to do this. Because if I explain it to you, maybe you'll, I think that's a really good point too. Obviously, and explaining to their level of comprehension and maturity level and developmental, understanding.
And when we do that, I think it gives them the opportunity to reflect as well on
think about why we're doing these. Instead of just blindly doing something.
Exactly. And then another piece to that is somewhat related is, within a certain spectrum that we know they're not going to get hurt or cause someone else harm, we allow them to explore for themselves, so to speak. And I'll give an example of what I'm talking about specifically. I've
gotten better about that, but that was something that's letting go of control has been extremely difficult for me, because I realized as I'm watching my kids play, I'm like, oh, be careful.
Yep.
Or, even that translates to being in the kitchen, like, oh, do you want to help me make cookies?
Yep.
Paleo cookies. You want to help me make cookies? Well, let me just do it.
Yeah.
Like, having the patience to do that. Sorry, that's just like another part of that. But to let go of so much control has been a huge part of parenting, is just releasing that.
Yeah. And an example of that, as it pertains to, we're not saying you can't do this because I told you so. We explain, but then we also allow them to have their own experience. We obviously are very clear about not having things like Reese's or Snickers or anything like that. Like, everything we buy is organic, like, overwhelmingly. Yeah. But we do have some snacks and things like this that they're allowed to have sometimes. And with that being said, Grayson on his own, because he has made decisions where we're like, Grayson, it's not wise for you to have a bunch of snacks in a day. And then we still allow him to try that himself. And then he has now established a correlation between him having way too many snacks and then feeling like crap afterwards, because that has happened sometimes. And so he has learned through his own experience, oh, I shouldn't have way too many snacks.
Yeah.
So that when we see him now going for multiple snacks in one instance, and again,
he'll know when to stop himself.
Yeah, he'll know when to stop himself. We're like, hey, do you think that's a smart decision? Remember what happened last time? And then he'll stop himself and then go for something healthier, like an apple or something like this.
I mean, I have so many stories on this little point right here.
Yeah.
But it's, I feel like we're really lucky that we had the wherewithal to instill at a very early age. I mean, good buggies versus bad buggies. I don't know if
that's true, but yes.
Right. Which is the good bacteria in your stomach versus the bad bacteria. But back then, we were saying, hey, you know, if you have too many of these things, it's going to make your tummy hurt and have too many bad buggies. And it wasn't necessarily a fear tactic. It was a way that he was able to comprehend, like, these things can be inflammatory, blah, 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 blah. And obviously using from my own personal experience why it was important to instill in him at an early age the difference between eating healthy or cleaner, I guess you would say, and being mindful of things versus not. Because, you know, I've had friends be like, how does he just know? And just also not being so rigid.
Yep.
Because that's the other part of it. It's like, if you're too rigid, then you're going to create a situation where they either have like a weird eating disorder when they grow up,
right,
or become too controlling, and or they're not going to experience life, and then or their toxic mentality, their toxic mentality around food is gonna make them sick rather than the actual food. And so, like you were saying, I've let Grayson indulge in things. He'd be like, but please, Mom, because this is really difficult, especially like at birthday parties and stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes I let him eat the cake. A lot of times I'll be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to take you to Natural Grocers after this, and you get to pick out whatever you want.
Right.
And like for Halloween, we do the Switch Witch.
Yep.
Give me all your shit candy, and we'll go replace it with something, you know. And some days I do let him indulge. And if he really begs for it, I'm like, okay, you know, what could possibly happen? And I didn't want this to happen. I wasn't trying to project this into our reality, but there was a real life situation where we were at our family reunion and Grayson was begging me for this chocolate cake. And I'm like, oh, you know, to me, it's more important that he feels included in the family. Like, everybody's around. It's this experience. To me, that was more important. So I was going to let him. I said, hey, this might hurt your tummy because these are things and ingredients that you typically don't eat. He ate it and he vomited.
Yeah.
So bad afterwards. But then he was like, yep, no, I get it. And he was like, I'm not eating that crap again, Mom. Yeah. Because like I said, he's super sensitive. But he was able to have that learned experience to be like, okay, I know my limit. And that's super important for autonomy.
Yeah. And the other thing that we've done, like, to further emphasize this, and he's just naturally a curious kid and wanting to know how things work, and we'll probably share some examples later on. Like, he's incredibly intelligent, just like incredibly connected. We found out that you were pregnant with our third because of him.
Yeah.
He came up to you in the kitchen.
Mom, you're pregnant.
And just nonchalantly said, Mom, you're pregnant, and we weren't
instant
trying.
Download. Like,
it was 4 days before what would have been your period. It was pretty incredible. But is that I explained to him, hey, the reason that it's healthier to eat this organic food from nature is because this is food that is naturally provided by God, versus these foods, and I'm pointing to processed foods in this case, are foods that man has taken God's ingredients and manipulated them in various ways. And sometimes they can be good, sometimes they can be bad, depending on the intention of the individual and the ingredients that were put into them. But ultimately, it's better to eat food that's coming directly from God. And he totally gets that. He totally understands that, oh, this is better for me than these other ones. And he naturally on his own now makes those decisions as a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, you'll hear him, and it's not coming from a position of, oh, I'm scared what my parents are going to say. He'll ask on his own when he's out at places and someone offers him something. He's like, is this organic? Or like, what are the ingredients in this? And he asks on his own because he has established that his own correlation, because we have given him that freedom, while also emphasizing our perspective on it as guides that we are as parents. Like, hey, this is our perspective on it. And then he's come to his own determination. It's really incredible to witness when you give them that freedom while also giving them sort of these parameters. Because obviously we're not going to let them like, hey, have this gun and just go use it. You know what I mean? Like, there's boundaries, because we are their guides. We're supposed to ensure their safety, but there is still a spectrum of you want them to have their own experience there too.
100%. Which is really why we like this school setting that he's in.
Yeah.
I know some people were asking about, do you homeschool or this and that? And he currently goes to a self-directed learning academy that we're very fortunate to be near. Works out for all of us. I really did try the homeschooling thing route with him, but Grayson and how his needs are and where my nervous system was at that time. I think I might have touched on this before in the other podcast, but it just wasn't a good match. And so he needed more than just me. But obviously we make up for the time that he's gone and have a really intentional time, which also, like I said earlier, I was going to lead into, people also asked about like screen time and what we do for that, because that, you know, how do you shield your children from the propaganda or all the things on the internet? We've had to have those conversations with Grayson that there are tricky people out there.
Yeah. So because people asked about how we educate our kids, the school that our son goes to, they don't have teachers, they have guides, they don't have grades. They have like a spectrum of ages per group, so they're with kids of pretty much all ages, and they spend
the whole language of the place is different.
Yeah, they spend a ton of time outside. It's a completely different experience, and we're obviously huge advocates for homeschooling, self-directed learning, and this is like a variation of, I won't say a homeschool pod, but it's self-directed learning. That's the whole approach. Like the teachers don't dictate things, they ask questions. It's all based on the Socratic method. So question asking, helping the kids stimulate critical thought, and it's very much play-based learning, which we've really loved the experience. And we understand that we're blessed in that respect, living in the Austin area, that there's a lot of schools like this because there's such a high concentration of like-minded people in this area. So we're very blessed in that respect. But when it comes to, we'll jump to how we approach like balancing time with each other, balancing time with kids, balancing time with all the things that we do later.
Still trying to figure that out.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure that out, but we do honestly a pretty good job, I would say. But I want to talk about how we approach electronics with our kids, because someone asked about that. So yeah, you go ahead and jump in there.
As far as like screen time, you mean content or EMF?
All of it.
Okay.
All of it.
Yeah. So screen time, admittedly so, like I would be lying if I wasn't saying that our kids never watch TV. Like, especially with this third pregnancy, I've been super sick, you've been super busy, and being away from family, we just kind of have a lack of support, to be honest, which is why we're moving and blah, blah, blah. But, so that's where content of allowing our kids the time to have the screens and content becomes very important. I've had to have conversations with Grayson to why he can't have access to certain things, because he's just also really smart, or he'll hear other kids be like, well, they get to watch this and blah, blah, blah. You know, that comparison game, which sucks. But having to explain to Grayson that, you know, there's tricky people out there, and they're not always going to have our best interest, you know, obviously using language that he can understand and comprehend.
He understands a lot.
He does, but I'm just saying, like, to where he can comprehend, you know, what I'm saying, that there are things out there on the internet that kids are exposed to every day that is not safe, and is not safe for their brain development, and just really emphasizing safety in that. And then so we've kind of made the decision to not allow them to have like things like YouTube and stuff like that, because even if with parental settings, there's things that get slid in and advertisements that it's just
we don't
not
even do
worth
YouTube Kids. There's like a YouTube Kids app that we tried for a little bit, and we don't do that anymore
we don't
either.
do that.
Like when it comes to content, there is
Older
times where
TV shows, I would say, there's some really good accounts out there. Sorry, I'll let you say that in a second, but there are some good accounts out there that really do talk about safer content for your kids that are less overstimulating. But we also just have a balance as far as like, did you check all the boxes before you earn screen time? because we have teetered on allowing too much to where you can see a change in behavior.
Totally.
Or an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And, at times I'm like, oh, I'm a terrible mom. I let them have too much TV. I'm just being authentic. Like, this is a struggle as a mom, as a stay-at-home mom, and tired as hell, pregnant, trying to do all the things. And sometimes my kids are really wanting all of my attention, and I don't have everything to give at that moment. And so I have relied on the TV. And I think that's just reality in the day and age that we live in. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm this perfect.
I watched shows when I was younger, like so many people did. It's just like moderating what content they're exposed to. And we tried YouTube Kids.
Telling them why. Like why we have the limitations and why it can be overstimulating for your brain. And that content today is different than what it was. And just really having those conversations and open conversations. With Charlie, that's a different story because, she's only 3, but also more of a reason to have more parameters with her having TV time because her brain is so little and impressionable and developing. And I can't even tell you off the top of my head right now. I guess she really likes Peppa Pig and Bluey. I can't really find much propaganda in those.
There is some in Peppa Pig, but even if there is, if like our kids ever come across that, we just have an open conversation. We say, hey, for example, there's a Peppa episode that just briefly alludes to Peppa went to the doctor and got shots and the shots hurt, but this is going to help protect from disease. And we just explain how that's not entirely true. And
that's
our
not
kids
what our family
totally understand. Like they totally get it. And we're not dictatorial in saying this. We talk openly about like the difference between that approach to things and our approach to things and how, again, in little examples, Grayson sees, our son, he sees how, if I eat too many processed foods, this is what happens. If I don't spend enough time outside, I get overstimulated and I start to get a little bit stuffy in my nose. He sees those things. He openly understands them, and it's through his own direct experience because we've cultivated that sort of environment.
Right.
Yeah. And so when it comes to screen time, though, another thing that I'll add is we don't allow them tablets, phones. We don't allow them that stuff. And like our approach is that when they turn 13 or 14, we might give them a phone. The only time we allow tablets,
they're Kindles,
is a Kindle on a long car ride, like a really long car ride.
And they're in airplane mode because it's safer with everything's downloaded. They're in airplane mode. They have their red light screen on, so there's no blue light, or they're wearing their raw optics.
Yeah, we're trying to get them to wear their raw optics.
Well, Charlotte.
Yeah, like Grayson is so good about wearing his raw optics. Charlie is not, and raw optics is so great in that because they have the kids ones that are very stylish, but our daughter Charlie will not wear them. And then the general question on protection from EMF. So obviously, they're never on tablets unless they're using our phones sometimes, like to FaceTime a family member, but even that is incredibly rare. And they're not using our phones really. There's sometimes where Grayson wants us to film him doing something and like that's there, but that's on occasion. But we sleep with our Wi-Fi off at night. We limit screen time as it is. And again, it's only like certain TV shows that we allow them to watch. And then we have them wear raw optics if they're, watching something on screens. But then we also have the only capability they have to even get on TV or anything like that is Apple TV. And luckily Apple TV has a filter mode that you can turn on, like a red screen that we turn on for them. I think that's our general approach to protecting them from EMFs. Like, we do have Wi-Fi in our house. And we didn't want that initially. Actually, we told the Wi-Fi company because we had on our home Ethernet ports put throughout the house where the TV should be and then also where the office is at home. And we told the Wi-Fi company we only want Ethernet, and they couldn't comprehend what we were saying. They didn't.
It's kind of like trying to get a removal of a smart meter. They're like, "What do you mean? A regular meter?"
Like I'm like,
"Well, what have we been doing for this past?"
What did you do before this Wi-Fi company?
You're going to go into labor spontaneously?
Yeah.
Well, what have women been doing?
Exactly. It's just crazy, and it's crazy how quickly that occurred.
Go back.
Well, it's crazy how quickly that occurred. Like with that paradigm, with the birth paradigm, all the things you're saying. Like 10 years ago, Wi-Fi was like emerging, well, maybe 15, 20 years ago, Wi-Fi was emerging as a new thing, and it was primarily Ethernet. But now when you try to tell this Wi-Fi company, at least the particular one we chose, hey, we only want Ethernet, they can't comprehend. No. So what we do is we do have our Wi-Fi on most of the time during the day, but we turn it off at night. We just leave it off at night. And I do understand that there are negative effects of being around Wi-Fi networks throughout the day. But I will say we don't turn it on typically first thing in the morning. We try to wait. We're not always perfect about that, but yeah, that's our general approach to protecting our kids from EMF. And like, I'm very big on, and you're getting better about this. Like about saying we need to go outside. Like we need, even if it's cold outside, and I know you hate the cold, we have to spend time outside. 100%. It's essential that we spend time outside. So, and especially in the summertime, Grayson will sometimes come out there and like ground with me. And actually in the summertime, we used to have a rule, and he doesn't even necessarily want shows first thing in the morning or anything like that either. Cause there was a period of time that he used to ask, can I watch a show right when he wakes up?
Yeah.
It's cause he's obsessed with Legos and reading right now, which is really cool.
Yeah.
He just loves reading books and building Legos.
He's putting together an 18 and up Lego set.
Yeah.
He's
by
7.
himself. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. But all that to say, he used to do a thing where he would go outside and ground for 5 minutes when he would first wake up, and then we would allow him screen time while he's eating breakfast. Light. Yeah. So that's kind of our approach to EMFs. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I was just going to say, it's not, I mean, I don't know if LED lights really contribute to that, but we do have LED lights.
We keep them off literally all the time. Like all the time.
And so we just have lamps and
luckily in our house, we have some pretty big windows. So there is natural light coming in, albeit the windows are now designed with filtering out certain bandwidths of light, which really sucks.
Which is why we need to go outside and yada yada.
Right, but the general point is, at the very least, we're not getting a ton of LED and fluorescent light exposure because we just don't have them on. Like I probably get way more than our family because I do this type of shit and sitting under studio lights all the time. But yeah, that's our approach. Okay. Another question is our approach to nutrition as a family. Yeah, I'll let you comment on that first.
Well, I mean, nutrition, it fluctuates, right? Because we went through a phase where we were extremely strict on everything that we ate, and then we realized quickly that that was more toxic than, I guess, I kind of hate the words intuitive eating, but as a mom, I know what affects my kids and what doesn't. And it's a delicate balance of not being so rigid, but also having the boundaries with certain foods that I know that our sensitive kids are more susceptible to being affected from. I typically still stay towards the Whole30 diet or paleo, and I use Pinterest a lot for finding really good recipes, but we do have things like raw milk in our fridge.
Raw cheese.
And raw cheese. Charlie's obsessed with raw cheese.
Yeah, our daughter just...
She has a different, I mean, because of her birth, she has a different gut situation than Grayson does.
Her gut tends to be much less sensitive than Grayson's gut is.
Right.
Yeah.
So...
We're more lenient with her when it comes to food.
We are. Yeah, we are. But as far as nutrition goes, like obviously trying to get a lot of our good minerals from our water source, remineralizing our waters and just eating at home. Also
from food though too. Like we get a lot of our minerals.
That's what I was going to say, but mostly high protein, paleo, Whole30. To me, mindset is more important than nutrition.
Yeah.
But we still have a organic, clean, not ultra processed. I mean, we have some organic Simple Mill crackers here and there. But for the most part, nutrition has not been something that's the center of our home anymore. It's also just our kids know that we eat this way. And they've been instilled with the values of eating good food and being grateful to the life that is sacrificed for us, and just kind of intertwining that to our daily life makes food less mindless and more meaningful.
We pray over all of our meals when we eat together as a family.
Yeah.
And pray over our food.
Yeah. But I think nutrition has, to me, it's not so as, I'm not so psychotic about it as or it's not the forefront of everything anymore. Although that was like the first turning point in my healing journey, where I would say like that was obviously because I removed so much crap. I don't know. Does that make sense?
I mean, I'll add to that. So we eat organic, like that's a given.
Natural grocers, like
100%. We eat organic food only, and we do have some processed foods in our house, which are typically like 100% fruit snack, 100% fruit juice, fruit snacks, or fruit snacks. Some meat sticks. We just got a big thing of Paleo Valley meat sticks, which I love. We have bone broth protein powder also from Paleo Valley that we consume quite a bit. We have, like, what other processed foods do we have for our kids? We have made good cookies, which are organic cookies that have like broccoli in them and stuff like that. But those are supplemental to whole nutrient dense foods, of which we're not incredibly strict on, like, oh, you will get this portion of meat, this portion of fruit. And it's also different per kid. Like sometimes our son Grayson trends towards he doesn't want meat, and we're not going to force him to eat meat. We do try to encourage him to, but we're not going to force him to. And he trends towards wanting fish more than, especially you hate fish. So he loves salmon. Whereas our daughter, Charlie, is a little bit more, raw cheese and
raw meat.
And raw meat, literally. Like that's her favorite two things to eat. And that's what she eats. That's not like her only diet, but that's what she eats a lot of. And then they do sometimes have snacks. And then when we're eating at home, again, we eat organic, nutrient-dense foods with a little bit of snacks here and there. And then when we're out to eat, we're not like incredibly strict. We like to experience this reality and have, last night we went to an Asian place in the Austin area that's incredibly good that has bao buns. And I'm sure they're not made with 100% organic ingredients.
No, but they do have things like Vital Farms.
Yeah, they do use Vital Farms eggs.
Which apparently is under scrutiny.
Yeah, apparently Vital Farms is good.
But
the point is, like,
to me, I'm going to circle back because I think what we've learned and what we've gone through over the past couple years, nutrition is a big deal, but I would emphasize stress management and energy.
Totally.
It should be where the conversation is going.
100%. Like nervous system regulation is the most important thing, clarity, internal peace, and cultivating that. I mean, I've said this a number of times on the show, and like you see it happen in me all the time, and it happens in you as well. I can trace back each time that I have gotten sick to a time when I was perpetually stressed out.
100%.
Every single time, without exception now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. And now we're doing, and I think this is part of one of the questions that somebody had asked is like how you manage your time for yourself and things like that. We're doing a better job of being like, hey, I recognize I need to go take a bath.
Yep.
I'm starting to get to this point where I'm going to freak out on everybody and I need to remove myself from the situation. And you did a really good job 2 nights ago where you're like, I'm okay. Because I know I
had a really stressful phone call.
Yes. Yeah. And you were doing a really good job at making sure that I wasn't going to get sucked in because you know how I am.
Yep.
And so you're like, I'm okay, but I need to go and do this for myself.
Yep.
And I think that is incredible.
I cried in the bathtub.
And
grown ass man, and I'm good.
And I'm glad you
did.
But
no, seriously, like I won't get into the details, but the context of that phone call was incredibly stressful. Yeah. And I went, took a bath, cried in the bath, and I was still a little bit emotionally down, and then woke up the next day and I was
recharged,
still a little bit emotionally down, but did my routine and felt better. And like, and that's all it takes. Like and just accepting that you're not always going to be perfect. You're going to have times where you get triggered by things. You're going to have times when things make you upset, and that's totally okay. And it's not this new age, oh, love and light, like I should only feel good all the time. No, it is loving to yourself to allow yourself to fully experience the emotions that are present with you. And it's essential that you do that. So that's what
it's also more selfish. Sorry to interrupt, but it's more selfish to not take that time for yourself.
Totally.
Like, and I think you and I have had moments where we get jealous of the other person, knowing when to ask for when they need a break. It's like, oh, well, fine. You need to leave the house?
Yeah.
And it's like,
but we've gotten over that now. Now
totally,
we like 100% like.
I'm just talking about when we were in the depths of.
Yeah, when we were in the depths of everything. I agree. I don't disagree. Like
7th year itch. But being able to recognize like, hey, I need to step away. And sometimes we lovingly remind each other. It's hard for me, I think, just because I'm pregnant and everything's heightened, to not take it personal, to be like, oh, you think I need some time? Yeah. But like to remind each other lovingly, like, hey, I see that you've been up since 6 something working from the crack of dawn. You need to go work out, or you need to go do something for you.
Yep.
And to lovingly remind each other that that's important and almost selfish when you don't do it. Because when you're not taking care of, you know, what you need to take care of, then that's going to bleed out to the entire family dynamic.
100%. You're not going to be able to show up as a parent. So it's not selfish to take time for yourself. It is essential that you take time for yourself. And the way that manifests for you is different. You tend to be more flowy and less rigid. I don't think I'm rigid, but I am very routine oriented. I am. And I do better with the routine. And we've established that. Like for me, my routine, and it varies. I have a goal to wake up at 5:30. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes I do put snooze on my alarm and I wake up at 5:45 or 6. But ultimately, my routine that I've established for all of 2025 is I wake up first thing in the morning, write down 10 things that I'm grateful for to get my mind in a state of gratitude. And then after I write down 10 things that I'm grateful for, I say this prayer that I've written out that is very meaningful to me. This prayer that I've written out about how I'm a vessel for God, about, I can maybe share that at some point, but I say this prayer in the morning, and then that is immediately followed by me either doing Qigong or meditating, depending on whichever I feel more, you know, in the need to do in that situation, whether it's like cultivating and moving energy or just like calming my mind. If it's just calming my mind, go more meditation. If it's moving energy throughout my body, it's more Qigong. Yeah. And then from there, if I feel up to it, I go work out. And if I don't feel up to it, I don't go work out until later in the day. But that's the other thing for me that is essential, is moving energy and moving 100%. My body. Like absolutely essential for me.
I'm the same.
So that's where this morning when I had, maybe this was a little bit too rigid, but I was like, I need to work out because I didn't work out yesterday.
Honestly, you want to know, after you left, I had to like remember that you are kind of rigid when it comes to that kind of stuff. That I'm like, okay, this is just how his mind works. Yep. And that I need to not take it personal. Like I was taking it personal, like, oh, he doesn't care what I want to wear and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Like just as your partner, I was like, well, why wouldn't he be interested in what I went to wear? I don't know, just running down the street with.
I knew you were going to look gorgeous anyway. Look at you. You showed up, you figured out what to wear.
Well, all black, like my soul.
I mean, I weren't all black, but
I'm just kidding.
No, but taking that self-care time is essential so that you can show up as a better parent. Yes. And like, it's also understanding that our kids are, how do I put this nicely?
They love to hang out with us.
They love to hang out with us, which is great. Like they really do love being around us.
We're packed, for sure.
And you know what's really cool though, is in some of those moments of me taking time for self-care, especially lately, our son Grayson has gotten up really early, and the other day he said the prayer with me. He wrote down 10 things that he's grateful for while I was writing down 10 things that I'm grateful for, and I was explaining why I do that. And then we both meditated together for like 15 minutes.
Grayson.
Yeah, it's just like, wow, this is so cool. So you can also do some of those self-care activities that are essential for you and include your kids. Not always. Sometimes you need
it's kind of checking the box of like, okay, spending intentional time with your kid, but also this is giving back to myself so I can give out to others.
And when we do that self-care, which I think is the priority for each of us, we are then able to show up more intentional with our kids and like where we're not as prone to being overstimulated or triggered or anything like this. So the self-care comes first on a day-to-day basis. And as a man, that requires me to also make what could be considered sacrifices. I don't consider them sacrifices, but okay, that means I have to get up earlier. I have to get up earlier than everyone else because I need that time to myself.
Yep.
Got to do that. And if I don't do that and I don't do that consistently, then I feel tension in my body. I feel poopy. And that's why this morning, because I didn't work out yesterday, I'm like, okay, Kylee, I'm sorry. I gotta go work out right now. And I think when it comes to spending time together with each other, we do a really good job balancing it out. It is a balancing act. The other goal that I've set this year is that once a month, I will go on a date with my wife. Once a month, I will go on a date with my kids, each of them individually. And then once a month, and this is at least, it's not just once a month. Once a month, we will go on a family, like out to dinner type thing. And then once every 3 months, Kylee and I will spend at least a night away together. It might be a little bit harder now with the new baby, but that's the goal. And then once a year, we go on a family trip. And then a friend of mine, and we haven't started this yet, but this is like our goal for this year. Our
intention, yeah.
I would say that we did all of those things too much last year because we definitely spent too much time eating out. And that's the hard thing.
It's hard when you're pregnant and everything's gross.
Yeah, no, I get it. But we do a good job of balancing out.
It's my excuse for everything these days. I'm pregnant.
Like for me, I'm running the way forward. I have multiple projects that I'm involved in right now. I'm obviously doing this podcast. There's a lot of things that I do. And I've made it a goal this year to not be on my phone. And again, I'm not perfect in this, after 6:30 and not be on my phone before 8:30 a.m. And again, I'm not perfect in that, but I'm
going to hold you to that.
Yeah, I know, but
our kids already do. Our kids will check us and be like, put your phone down.
Yep.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But, that's our general approach with like family time. It is a delicate balance because there is a lot of things going on, but it's really getting clear internally on when you've reached your fill or when you've had enough, or knowing when to shut it off.
And allowing your partner that time and not taking it as like personal or be jealous that they're having that time for them. Mm-hmm. It's actually better for the relationship when that other person has that time.
Yep. Yeah.
You'll show up better for yourself and the family, like you said. Just to lead into, you were talking about your morning ritual as far as like praying, and I think a lot of people are curious about the conversation of our faith journey and what that looks like. To me, like, I stay away from saying anything like that on the internet because no matter what I say or do when it comes to certain topics, people come at me. And so it's interesting because you're like, I have no shame. I'm going to say whatever I want on the internet. But I think people are curious about our journey, and I think it has evolved, and it's kind of a cool story as far as like our belief in God and Jesus and all that. So I don't know if you wanted to touch on that.
I mean, to summarize, I grew up in a family up until age 14 that would just go to church like for Easter and Christmas. And then from age 14 onward, we started, as an quote evangelical Christian family that went to an evangelical church that have, worship services with all the theatrics and like
the dopamine hits.
Yeah, like the dopamine hits, which like I still think are beautiful expressions of reverence to God, but it can be a little bit much in many cases. Like I went to Hillsong Church for quite some time when I was at West Point, and like talk about theatrics, like another level. Anyway,
and it's not to bash on anybody who feels called or pulled to those certain environments.
No.
I think just because the experiences that we've been through with family, but also just really exploring consciousness and the nature of this reality, it's given us a different perspective on God and the depth of God.
Yeah.
And when you do go back and return to church, because we have gone back to church.
Within the last 2 years, we went
to a few services. Yeah. We don't go often, admittedly, but when we do, it's like when we hear that scripture, first off, for me, I don't remember learning scripture growing up because I was a Catholic, and I have major gaps in my life, period. I know I went to Sunday school, but I don't remember a lot of stories of the Bible besides, the popular ones, Jesus' birthday, things like that. And so meeting you was an introduction of going to church regularly when we were younger. And then we kind of slipped into this, I wouldn't say we never really got pulled into New Age, but people would say it's New Age, which is unfortunate because Eastern traditional
spiritual approaches,
have been, I would say, commercialized and weaponized into like a New Age approach. And I'm like, actually, no, this is because I got really into like Ayurvedic medicine and things like that. I'm like, this is original stuff. Like, this is not New Age. But then after moving to Austin, I'm like, oh, I get what they mean by New Age now.
Yeah, where people like form entire
love and light and everything's out here and airy and not grounded in reality and dealing with your traumas face on and using certain psychedelics and things as a way of escaping instead of really facing things. But anyways, my point is that I didn't really know religion until I really met you and started going with you. And then we kind of went down this like consciousness route because we were doing a lot of self-inquiry and exploring because our reality was being shattered one moment after the next because of family dynamics and then COVID and all of these things that we had opportunities presented to us to continue to just question the nature of reality. And so when we did return to church, we were like, wait, does that pastor know what he's saying when he's saying those scriptures? Because to me, it hits differently now.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, my overall perspective is that I've, again, gone from being someone who just showed up to church Christmas and Easter to evangelical Christian to casting all that aside, saying all of it's wrong for a period of time, to exploring consciousness and many things that would be considered New Age, many things that I would consider now New Age. And New Age is a very subtle thing. Like you said, it's an amalgamation of a bunch of different practices, but like I would say the ultra New Age-y people tend to like outsource to gurus who channel. And I'm not saying channeling isn't a real phenomenon, or are obsessed with like what starseed they are and what supposed planet they came from in their past lives, and like have just an obsession with crystals and tarot cards and doing insane amounts of psychedelics and ayahuasca ceremonies. And it's not that any one of those individual things is wrong or bad. It's that people form entire identities around them coming from the context of escaping, whether they realize it or not. And
or placing all their value on that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I think there's a fine line because many of those things can be incredibly helpful in and of themselves. It's just all about your approach and how grounded it is in reality. Because I see a lot of people that I, think tend to be a little bit more New Agey that use a lot of those things as a form of escaping rather than trying to bring their experience of the divine God, source, creator down into their being in reality, and really navigating that understanding of who and what we truly are as beings, how we are all connected, while understanding that this, what many would call illusion of separation, is a purposeful experience that we are supposed to have. We are supposed to be in this experience that many refer to as the illusion of separation. Like it's very real to me, and you can still have that background context of, at our core, we are fundamentally one. I love that. That's great.
And that this is a spiritual experience altogether.
Totally. I love all of that. But I think that we've come to understand that where quote, New Age people miss it are it's not grounded in reality. And in many cases, it's that they won't subscribe to any form of morality. And it's sort of the like very Luciferian principles of do what thou wilt. Like, I'll do whatever I want to. Like, it's just love and light, good vibes type of thing. And I think that's wrong. But where we stand with God, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, is I tend to look at things more from a panentheist approach rather than pantheism. Pantheism says that God is all one being and there is not a distinct entity that we might still be a part of that still is this omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent entity, but that all is one and there is not a distinct entity within that. That's pantheism. Panentheism would say that, yes, we're all interconnected and linked to each other and still fundamentally one, but there is a distinct God that we are not separate from, we are a part of, but is still distinct, and we are not gods.
Right.
We are not the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent creator. We are inextricably linked to God, and we are fundamentally one with God, but God is still a distinct entity, we are
Father.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of our opinion of God and our, I guess, like our faith journey as well.
Well, and also me personally, the importance of Jesus, and not in
that's what I was going to say next.
Like, to me, I'm still breaking the conditioning of like feeling cringy when I say that, because of like, I did swing the other end of like diving into like Hillsong stuff and being like, Jesus, like, and then, you know, what is it within me that I've like, why do I feel cringe when I say Jesus? Like, that's also a weird thing to question in itself. Like, I shouldn't.
Yeah. What programming do I have?
Yeah. But I would consider myself a highly spiritual, sensitive person that has I think we all have gifts, and I think we all can create miracles like Jesus did. We haven't had the ability to like necessarily unlock all those powers or believe in ourselves. And, you know, that's a whole nother conversation about the fundamentals of how this reality works. But having certain personal instances, I actually got to have this conversation with Lara Day. When she was doing at our house. And because I was telling her that I've been having these dreams of demons. And it wasn't until, I guess, we were still living at your mom's house where I was like, I woke up one day being like, Jesus is really important. Like, I know that sounds really dumb just to say that, but for somebody who has been very disconnected to religion and God in general my whole life, I feel like, I mean, I didn't have a major importance besides Easter and Christmas and things like that. But waking up and being like, no, this man is important. There's weight to his name. And then recently having dreams of certain demons or entities and negative entities, and having the wherewithal within my dream to be like, Jesus, in Jesus' name. And that's the only time that I felt like that presence left. And having those personal experiences and being like, oh my gosh, there's something to Jesus that is very important. And for a really long time that I was just like, oh, Jesus, like cringy. And it shouldn't be that way, because there's, that's my own programming. But also acknowledging the importance of Jesus and what he was sent here to lead by example. Yeah.
And I'm still exploring, I think you are still exploring, like where Christ plays into all of this. Like, obviously, I agree with you, and I think that Christ is one of, if not the most important spiritual teacher ever in history. And there are so many different opinions on we've gone down the rabbit holes of, did Jesus actually even ever exist at all? Is it just a metaphor? Is it an allegory? Is it just a story that's told throughout time?
Is it an archetype?
Did he actually, is it an archetype? Did he exist, but a lot of the things that were attributed to him didn't actually happen? Is the Bible 100% accurate? Is it not accurate? We don't, we've still
questioned
exploring
many things.
And we're still exploring, and we're open to all of it. And we don't know where we land, except for that Jesus is an incredibly important figure, period. And there's some power to his name. And I think that's where we're at right now. But yeah, we definitely believe in God, and God, I define as the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent essence that permeates all facets of this reality, that is incredibly intelligent, is all the omnis, as I said, and that we can draw from, we can all access, that we are inextricably linked to and fundamentally a part of, but we are distinct from it. We are not omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omnipresent. We can access that, and we are inextricably linked to that God.
And that's something that we've explained to the best of our ability to Grayson too, because he does have bouts of anxiety at night and things like that. And so it's helpful to have those conversations with him about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey y'all, I'm here with Melissa Kupsch from Remedy Academy of Homeopathy. We are so stoked here at the Way Forward to be partnering with Melissa and Remedy in order to spread the message of homeopathy across the world, and also to partner on the eventual development of healing centers across the United States.
People are pretty quickly coming to realize that frequency is the future of medicine. We are witnessing the great resurgence of homeopathy right now. We're really moving away from that suppressive medical model. Whether it's for eczema, asthma, hormones, fertility, anxiety, depression, trauma, whatever it is, it all starts as energy in the person's field first. If we change our field, we can completely change our life. Our 2-year academy is open worldwide to anyone who wants to become a homeopath. We've got 5 lecturers, and we currently have over 500 students enrolled, which is record numbers in our field. A career in homeopathy is amazing for anyone who wants flexibility in their work and who wants to be valuable in creating this new world. We have stay-at-home parents enrolled. We have ex-medical professionals, grandparents signed up who want to learn how to heal their grandchildren and pass on that invaluable knowledge. We even have husband and wife teams. So my husband enrolled in the course with no prior knowledge of health as a background, and he is loving it.
Kylee is also enrolled as well. So my partner is, and she's so stoked to become a homeopath and to be helping to spread this message across the world.
The thing that we hear from so many of our students is, I found my thing. Homeopathy is the key. We harness frequencies from nature and we alter the field of all creations. So if anybody wants to join us or they want to know more about it, they can visit our website.
Yeah, and all that information will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about Remedy Academy, also RMDY Collective, also some of the homeopathic products that they have, please just head to the show notes. All of that will be listed there. In nearly all cases with modern health systems, you're waiting months for appointments only to spend a mere 10 minutes with a doctor who quickly hands out a generic diagnosis that is likely rooted in a total misunderstanding of health and causes, and then you're offered a one-size-fits-all medication or invasive treatments with unpleasant side effects. If this sounds all too familiar, consider a different approach with the New Biology Clinic, founded by Dr. Tom Cowan, a respected natural health doctor, author, and speaker. Dr. Cowan's holistic perspective on health and wellness and a deep understanding of the true nature of health and disease sets this clinic apart. With the New Biology Clinic, it's not about quick fixes and suppressing symptoms. The practitioners take time to understand your unique story, recognizing that health is unique to the individual and that illnesses have a variety of causes, physically and metaphysically. Members of the New Biology Clinic enjoy a flat monthly fee that includes a range of valuable services like health consults as needed, practitioner-led live streams on diverse health topics, access to a members-only resource library, and multiple live group sessions every month. These sessions cover fitness, breathing integration, biofield tuning, guided meditation, EFT tapping, and much more. Unlike traditional healthcare systems that thrive on frequent visits, prescriptions, treatments, and suppressing symptoms, the New Biology Clinic's motivation is to make you healthy and keep you that way. Visit newbiologyclinic.com to learn more and use code THEWAYFORWARD for $50 off your account activation. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com to receive $150 off your account activation. Your journey to genuine healing begins here. Another question that someone had is how we talk to our kids about the world and shield them from indoctrination. And I'll
Tricky
start.
People.
Say what?
Tricky people.
Tricky. Yeah, we just openly discuss them. Again, understanding that there are certain things that we may not want to get into, like satanic ritual abuse. We're not going to talk to our kids about that at this point. We're not going to talk
what's
to
age appropriate.
Yeah, what we deem individually in our unique circumstances, which you have to figure out as a parent, what's appropriate. But I think, like, for example, the way that we explain vaccines, we don't explain that there are these evil people that are malicious, that are wanting to cause harm to us necessarily. Like, the way that we have explained to our kids is that, hey, there's people that have come to misunderstand the way that the human body works based on some things that they believe. This is how I explained it to Grayson. And ultimately, unfortunately, many of the people who are doctors out there have come to misunderstand, like I said, how the body works, and then create various procedures around that misunderstanding that ultimately leads to something like vaccines, which they think are good. They think it's almost a form of medicine, and it's actually incredibly harmful. So our family just doesn't do those things, and we're different. And it's not that the other families who do them are bad. We just
our
see
family
it a
chooses
different way.
Not to.
Yeah, our family
That's
just chooses
exactly
not
how
to.
we explained wearing masks.
Yeah.
Because when we're out and about and our kids, kids say what it's on their mind, oh, he's wearing a mask. And I'm like, shut it.
Yeah.
Like, especially when Grayson was younger and we were in Oklahoma, he would be like, he's wearing a mask. And I've had to explain, our family chooses not to wear those things.
Yeah.
And that's what our family's decision is. And their mommy and daddy and their family chose to do that.
Yep. And Grayson also totally understands that viruses have never been proven to exist. He understands what the biofield is. We talk to him about it openly all the time.
The other day he goes like, wait, what's isolate mean again?
Yeah.
I'm like, it's so funny because he's heard the word isolate so many times within our household.
Yeah.
That he was like, wait, what's that mean again?
Yeah. Yeah. And like he fully gets all of it. And it's funny, yesterday asking him his opinion of government. I don't remember the context, but I just straight up asked him, I was like, Grayson, what's your opinion of government?
Yeah.
And again, we have had these talks, and this is where the Tuttle Twins books have been incredibly helpful because we read those.
He gets into them. Yeah.
Like, he gets it. He totally gets it on his own. But I asked him his opinion of government. He's like, I don't really like them because they print
their own money and then we can't.
Yeah, they print their own money and we can't. And I was like, well, the Federal Reserve is a government entity, but in general, he gets it. And he also understands that, well, they offer some protection in some ways, but they also like try to take our money and things like this. Like he fully gets that. And it's because we've had an approach where, if he does certain things around the house, or sometimes he can earn money for certain things, and we allow him to spend that money how he wants. And he was buying something on Amazon. Yes, we use Amazon from time to time. And he was buying something on Amazon. He was like, okay, I have $25 cash I can give you. And then when we went to check out, it ended up being $28 or something like that because of tax.
He was
like,
so
what?
pissed.
I'm like, yeah, remember this thing tax that I talked about? And he's like, oh, he like freaked out. He was so pissed.
Mad.
So he understands it. And he understands that, like, no, this is ridiculous. Like taxation, he fully gets all of it and has a deep understanding of it, which is really cool to see in a 7-year-old, to the degree that I'll just give this little anecdotal example. And our son has said some absolutely brilliant things. The other night when I was putting him down to bed, I was explaining, just because we were talking about food. I don't remember how it came up. And again, he fully understands that as well. But I started talking to him about Kylie's healing journey in that story, because I've never really fully told him that story of why it is we started doing all this, why I do this podcast, all of it. And naturally on his own, he said, Dad, is that why sometimes in commercials they put celebrities and like people that are on TV a lot in them because they want to convince you to buy them? And I nodded and I was like, yes, dude, absolutely. That's exactly why. He said, and is that why on like McDonald's and Taco Bell commercials, sometimes they'll put little kids shows and action figures and things on them because they want to get little kids to like them and buy them. And I'm like, exactly. That's exactly right.
It's basically like he's coming up with celebrity endorsements without knowing they're called celebrity endorsements. Kind of like when he brought up mom, like when he has these serious moments where he'll be like, Mom, what if Jesus is back on this earth, but he doesn't know he's Jesus? I'm like, are you asking me if Jesus is reincarnated?
Yeah. I have a whole list. I have a whole list of things that he said. I don't know if it's appropriate to bring up all of them because it would take a lot of time, but we have a whole list. And I think this is just a perfect indication of when you create sort of an open, self-directed learning environment and you're not rigidly dictating what your kids do while still maintaining the understanding that there are boundaries. Encouraging critical thinking. And maybe it's just that our son is a very unique soul, but he's said some things like you said, and he said that, by the way, when he was like 5, and it was out of nowhere. So it's not that we were having a conversation on Jesus or anything. He was looking out the window in the car, and this is typically how it occurs. He's staring out the window, just contemplating, and he'll turn to one of us and say something. And in that case, he said, what if Jesus is back on earth in someone else's body and doesn't know that he's Jesus? He's also said things like, Mom, what if we are inside of God's body? And then he followed that up with, what is the sky made of? And he's also said,
where's the edge of the earth?
Yeah, where's the edge of the earth?
Where does the earth end?
Where does the earth end?
He's asked me, I was putting him to bed one night, and he goes, wait. So let me get this straight. Like, just the way that he frames these things is so funny, his language. Wait. So let me get this straight. If everyone on this earth is born from somebody, who was the first person on this earth? And then I looked at him and I was like, go ask your dad. Because literally I'm like, do I get into Adam and Eve? What do I do? What do I do? This is an existential question that I don't know how to answer, because he comes up with these questions that I'm like, or just yesterday, he goes, Mom, how do they first make a cake? And I'm like, well, I don't know. They probably had different ingredients and trial and error with measurements to get it right. And he goes, but how did they know they were going to make a cake? And I'm like, this is why I like you, because you're thinking critically, and it's so natural to him to just think in that way.
Yeah, and it's because when he's at, quote, school, and he does go to a school, that's how they approach it. They're just cultivating critical thinking.
We should put a mic on him.
Yeah, seriously.
It would be so interesting to hear about their conversations with other kids at school like that.
Yeah, because it's not that he's being dictatorially told what to believe in any situation, even when it comes to us. We help him. Like, oftentimes he'll ask something and we'll say, well, what do you think about that? And see what his response is. And oftentimes he's right. And it's like, see, I think there's some innate intelligence that is then worked out of kids through conditioning over time. Another last example, and I have several. I have a whole list of just some of the things that he said. Mom, what if this world is fake and we're actually in a really big room with a ceiling? If this is fake, is God real? And then in another case, he said, Mom, what if we're inside of God's mind?
Yeah. Like, or is this a big dream?
Or if this is a big dream. Like, he's just said some of the most amazing things. And I think that's what happens when you cultivate an environment of critical thought. Got kind of off topic there, but that's fine. So yeah, when we talk to our kids about indoctrination and things like this, we just openly communicate it to them, but we don't attribute, whether we think this or not. We want our kids to believe that people are good fundamentally. We don't want our kids to believe.
But I've used those, like, there was a show that Grayson was watching on Netflix, I think it was. I can't remember the name of the show, but they were talking about having the doctor come over. It wasn't Peppa Pig, but it was another one with the bunnies.
Oh, I don't remember.
I don't know. And they were like, oh, we have to get our shots now. Yeah. And that's when I do say, hey, Bubby, this is called propaganda.
Yeah.
when I say we can't watch certain shows because of propaganda, and something comes up, that's when I say, Grayson, this is what propaganda is. Propaganda is when they want to show you something to make you believe it's true, and they put it in little kids shows when you're young, so when you get older, you believe it to be true, or
right.
you use those as examples and explain, this is an example of propaganda. Totally. And I tell him openly what propaganda is. And so have those open conversations with your kids and cultivate an environment where they will come to you openly about those things.
Yeah, and you just
because now he will be like, Mom, I think I saw something inappropriate.
Yeah,
and I'll be like, what is it?
Yeah,
and I'm thinking worst case scenario,
Right.
But now he doesn't really have an opportunity to see those things. But I'm very much aware in the world that we live in, kids are exposed to things at an earlier age. And just having those open conversations is extremely important.
Totally. But just to round out what I was saying with respect to indoctrination, we don't want our kids to think that, like, to grow up thinking, oh, doctors are bad. That's not what we're thinking. We just want them to understand that in many ways, in a variety of things across mainstream culture, people have come to accept things that are just fundamentally true, but they're well-intentioned people. And the way we approach teaching our kids about what would be colloquially, I can never say that word.
I can't either. I'm not even going to try.
Known as like bad people or evil people, is that it's oftentimes that they were kids who were traumatized, who were just traumatized and never had the resources to deal with them as adults. And that's not excusing said, quote, bad people or excusing their behavior. It's just to help our kids cultivate an environment of understanding, and also understand that when they experience a situation where another kid is maybe doing something to them that's not so great, it helps our kids maybe look to some deeper understanding of, okay, maybe this kid had a really bad morning, or maybe his brother and sisters have been mean to him at home, or maybe his parents have been really mean to him at home. And that's why this is happening. And it sort of makes it so that the experiences aren't as personal, and it takes some of the weight off for them. And we've had those real experiences come up with
kids. Especially, I can give you an example quickly. We were on a field trip, and I had to reference back to this field trip before to Grayson, because there's a kid at school that it wasn't very nice to Grayson. I was like, hey, do you remember when his mom and grandma were there at the field trip with us, and we looked at each other because, we had that kind of moment of acknowledgement that they weren't being very nice to him. Well, that's why he's not very nice to you. And just that real life experience to be like, oh, I see.
Yep.
And how that gets passed along.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible to have those experiences. And again, we just take the time to be very intentional with our kids and explain things. Overwhelmingly, like, that's one of many things I think we're really good about it as parents, is we very rarely, if ever, say, because I said so. Like,
it's open dialogue.
I don't even think I can remember any time we've ever said that.
I'm
recently,
sure I have
like,
out of a trigger, to be honest.
Yeah,
because I'm
we're not perfect, but like we do a really good job of explaining things to our kids, and they're much smarter than many people give them credit for. They can comprehend. Like,
they see and feel things that we...
Right.
Yeah. Like, I underestimated him with that 18 and up Lego set. We were like, oh, there's no way he's going to do that. Yeah. He's going to be disappointed because Alec is not going to have a lot of time to cut out for that.
Right.
And
I thought I was going to have to spend like 12 weekends in a row, which whatever, I was prepared for, but that would have not, he wanted this Lego set for Christmas. That's what we got him, is this Lego set. And it was 18 and up, like collector's item, adult Lego set, the Home Alone house. And he built it himself, literally completely by himself. Like, I helped him with a couple things, but only because he asked me to. And it was more that he just wanted me to do the activity with him, which is totally fine. Like, he is incredibly intelligent, and that's just naturally how they are when you raise them in an environment, kind of how we've raised them, I think. Okay. Best health practices. Again, for us, we've come to understand that yes, nutrition is important. Yes, many of like eliminating toxins in your environment is important, but I think the most important thing is emotional regulation and really giving yourself space to feel your feelings, giving each other space to feel feelings.
And doing the things that bring you joy.
Yeah, doing
like
the things that bring you joy.
Actually doing that and not seeing it as a selfish thing, like to take that time for yourself.
Totally.
Like, oh, I'm doing this because I actually really like driving in the car by myself and listening to Alanis Morissette and doing these things and
going to get a pedicure or going to get a massage. Right.
Don't put me on blast. It's
all good.
Like, I will
that's
get
what you
shit.
love doing.
Yes, but that's the thing.
Working out. You teach bar class. Like you really love doing
bar.
that. You teach bar even as you're 31 weeks pregnant. For me, it's snowboarding. It's DJing. It's doing those things like I really love doing, playing pickup basketball. And like we need to do those things that we love.
Times for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think other than that, best health practices, like the things that are really easy, low hanging fruit, especially if you listen to this podcast, getting adequate time outside, putting your bare feet on the earth. It's a little challenging for her because she hates the cold and we're in the midst of cold season right now. Never. But putting our bare feet on the earth, getting outside, getting adequate sunlight. Again, it primarily, in my opinion, comes back to the emotional piece. So being very emotionally regulated and feeling your feelings as they arise. I think that's really important. Yeah. And then what we do when our kids get sick. So we just had this experience. And what's interesting is like, I could see how if you don't have the understanding of the lack of evidence for contagion, you might falsely believe that
here we go.
This, type of experience is contagion. And like, I'm of the mindset that there is other plausible or possible explanations when it comes to some sort of energetic transmission. But for example, so our kids both got sick. Now, there's so much context with them getting sick. We had we went to my dad's in Colorado for Christmas, which is a 14-hour car ride. We stayed at this hotel that when you walk in the hotel, you could smell the toxic cleaning products that they use. So that's one thing. Like you could literally smell it. It was like a palpable experience. And we stayed there, going there and coming back. We were eating out a lot more. We were eating
just the bodily stresses of not being in your own environment and being exposed to new toxins, and then family dynamics.
Then we had a lot of we had a very big familial traumatic situation occur over Christmas that you and I handled well, but it was just nonetheless very, with our extended family, let's say. No need to get into details there.
Right.
And then like I said, our kids are eating much more unnaturally, exposed to a lot more EMFs, both on the car ride and the hotels.
That mysterious fog.
And then went through this mysterious fog, which a lot of people said that they got sick from. I think a combination of all those things, and then also it being the winter time and we're not exposed to as much sunlight. We're not spending as much time outside, especially when we're in Colorado, aside from going out to go snowboarding a couple of times with my son and maybe go sledding a few times that we did. He very rarely got outside at all. And same with our daughter. And so they both got sick. And how we approach that is they both at various points had high fevers. They both had high fevers. We didn't even use a thermometer though. We just trusted that we have the judgment as parents to know that their bodies are doing exactly what they're supposed to. And if it gets to a point where like, okay, there's something more, we might need to take them into some specialists, or this is an emergency and acute situation.
Yeah, like with dehydration, like things like that of that nature that are very serious. Like a couple years ago, Grayson was vomiting for like days, and finally, like Nux vomica, which is a homeopathic remedy, was not cutting it, and it wasn't the remedy for him. It was time where it was like, okay, you very clearly need emergency medicine, and he needed fluids, whatever. But another really good point I think to bring up is our energy in response to them being sick. And a lot of times, because I'm the mama bear, and I'm highly emotional and very intertwined with our children, Alec needs to remind me like, hey, they're gonna be okay. Because that's still my indoctrination of like, oh, I'm going to freak out. And it's so funny because my sister and my friends, my best friends and I, we all talk about it. It's like when you're a mom and your kid is sick, sometimes your biggest toolkit that you have in your back pocket goes out the window, because fear does come up. It's just natural, because you're like, that's my kid. They're sick. Oh my God. And the best thing you could do for them is to remember that their body is so very intelligent, and that their symptoms are just signaling to you what they need or what their body is doing to get rid of it. And Alec does a really good job of reminding me, like, they're going to be okay.
Yep.
They can feel your energy. Basically, Kylee, check yourself. And sometimes we take turns with that.
I very rarely get worried about them when they're sick. I used to, but now like I have such a deep understanding that.
And it's not that I don't. Right. I think
you're a mom. It's different.
Yeah,
like, you
I'm
just
like,
need a little
I
bit
have
more
those
reminders.
oh shit moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't use a thermometer. Typically let low-grade fevers do what they need to do and what they're designed to do.
Even high fevers, though, we
right. But like, this is where homeopathy is huge in our house and where it comes in. And typically with high fevers come high uncomfortability, and I want my children to be comfortable. I'm not going to let them suffer. And this is where homeopathy is huge, and where I will use my first aid kit in homeopathy to ease their discomfort. Like, I'm not just going to let them suffer. And I recognize now, being a student of homeopathy, the energetic components of illnesses, and said illnesses, air quotes. But also I'm a mom, and I'm not going to let my kids suffer through things. I'm going to help assist their vital force, is what we say in homeopathy, to be stimulated to do what the body's innately, intelligently already doing.
Yeah. And I'd say that, like, we used to approach that in the context of wanting to suppress their symptoms, but now we're approaching it as we want to help enhance, just assist. And like, aside from homeopathy, we don't really give them anything else at all. Like, we give them,
I allow them to not have food.
That's the point. That's what I was just going to say. Like, we do what nature does when you see animals get sick, which is rare in nature. But they rest, and they drink more fluids sometimes. And that's what we have our kids do. We give them bone broth. Leave their
tummies empty.
We give them water. If they're fasting. Throwing up a bunch, we actually don't give them that much water, but we monitor it. Like, okay, you need fluids. Hydration. It's clear. Sometimes it's okay. They just need to, I won't say dry fast. I'm not going to call it that. No. But like, sometimes we just let their body express and just let them lay down. And that's literally all that they do. And we trust that their bodies are doing exactly what they're designed to do.
And I'll do things like, let's go outside and lay down.
Yes. Or go outside and lay down on the ground.
Or we'll take a magnesium or Epsom salt bath and things like that. Like, but in good, clean, filtered water, you know, because water is also very energetic. And sometimes Grayson will literally just float in the bathtub, and then he'll come out and he'll be like, oh, I feel so good. So yeah, just learning to, I think over the years, just really, because Grayson has, because of, XYZ with his birth and things like that, he's had said illnesses, happen over and over again. And each time we're presented with an opportunity of how are you going to respond instead of react, and having the faith that they're going to be better for it on the other end. And how much they've had advancements in their development after they've had these said illnesses, air quotes. Yeah.
What do you mean by said illnesses?
Because to me,
are you talking about like there is no
the symptoms? Yeah. When we say they're sick, I don't really think they're sick. They're having an upgrade. Their body is expressing energetically.
Or their body's just clearing toxicity, essentially. Yeah.
Yes. But I think at the end of the day, those toxins are their own forms of energy signatures that their body has come into contact with. That just,
like, you mean like what do you mean by that specifically?
Well, because at the very minuscule, minute detail of what we are energy. right? So I think certain toxins have their own signatures of energetic components to them that is toxic to our system.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. I think I get what you mean. Like it's the chemical itself can be toxic, but it's also an energetic signature on top of that chemical.
We've discussed that as far as like benzos.
Yeah, no, okay. I get what you're saying now. That makes sense. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I completely agree. Totally agree. But yeah, that's our general approach when our kids get sick. Like we're very much, and we've had to learn this over time because it can be very scary when kids become ill sometimes, especially when you're a parent and you tend to think worst case scenario, you've had a pretty traumatic, experiences and just have the rug pulled out from under you and waiting for the shoe to drop, so to speak. But all that being said, we've really learned to regulate ourselves ultimately, just in general, but then also when it comes to our kids getting, quote, sick, we know that their bodies are doing exactly what they're designed to do. And we can always trace it back to multiple things that occurred previous to that are not conducive to what, humanity was designed to live and to commune and to eat like. And that happens in every single case. And I think it's just an example of their body doing exactly what it's designed to do to heal. So that's the way that we approach that. Speaking of kids, the last one that we'll answer that people wanted us to discuss was our plan for this third birth. So yeah, I'd want to hear that from you, given that you're the one that's pregnant.
I think birth is incredibly individual to the person. And so this topic is very personal to me. Because I think whenever you share who you are on the internet, you're going to be open to people's opinions and what they think is best for you and your body, and having the boundaries to know, like, this is my experience, this is who I am. And also like shielding myself from social media has also been extremely important because a lot of times things will come without trigger warnings, and during pregnancy.
Just crazy things going on in the world, you mean?
Crazy things going on in the world, or women openly sharing their traumatic birth stories and what's happened to their babies and things like that. And really, actually during my second pregnancy, learning about hypno babies and having a bubble piece and having those energetic boundaries put in place was very important. And it's interesting with each, like I said earlier, each subsequent pregnancy, I've learned more boundaries, and not only for myself, but like, oh, it's not just about me anymore. It's about me and this baby and this life inside of me, and why it's important to have those boundaries. But yeah, so this topic is very emotional and sensitive because I know I'm going to be open to criticism. Like, people are going to think what they want to think. But I also think my midwife yesterday, she said it beautifully, birth is where you meet yourself. And I'm speaking in my personal opinion and experience only. Birth can be in a snapshot of where you are in your life. And have that reflected back to you. For example, with Grayson, his birth was very, it's also up to interpretation. Could have been very traumatic, or it could have been a big learning experience. And it was for me.
Both.
Yeah. I didn't educate myself going into his birth and pregnancy on all the things that could have been prevented. And then that was reflected back to me during his labor and delivery. Babies are delivered, pizzas are. And then I empowered myself with education and knowledge throughout my second pregnancy with Charlie. And then it was reflected in my, and I'm not going to say, there's outliers there where things do happen. Plan Bs do happen. And I'm not saying like, oh, it was all because of me and my work and preparation why I had such a perfect birth. But I will say, I think that has a lot to do with it. And my trust in myself and my body to do what God intended for me to do. And having that trust in that. And so Charlie's birth was at a birthing center. And this birth will be at home. And I will have midwife support there. Because that's what I choose. Mm-hmm. And I have friends who are very open and honest about their opinions with free birthing. And then friends who are very supportive either way, whatever I choose. And I just feel like the internet's very divided. I don't know. Maybe I'm coming to this conversation like, hey, I just want to preface, like, this is my choice. And I think this is where I feel most empowered. I will be at home. And I have friends who are not in this world, natural world, where they're like, well, you're crazy. And, and put up your bubble of peace and like, you know what, this is my choice. And this is what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I will have the support of my husband there and my midwife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what I choose. And I have the faith that this baby will come exactly the way they are intended to. Mm-hmm. And we will do it together. Me and this baby will do it together.
Yeah. And we really like our midwife. We're not going to name names because like she listened to the episode on free birth and overwhelmingly agrees with everything that Emily said in that episode. And she is a midwife, but we've had friends who've had
very
this
positive
midwife
experiences.
That have all had very positive experiences. And this comes back to sort of the nuanced approach that I discussed on multiple parts of the free birth podcast that I did. And it's ultimately your decision, and it's the decision that you feel most empowered with. And luckily in this case, she is, I'm trying to be careful of words. She's a bit more lenient, which is great. She is very, very natural, which is great. And we know multiple people who've had experiences with her that all had positive experiences. So
and
that's
I feel
the approach
very
we're taking.
like nurtured and held by knowing that she'll be there.
Yep.
That feminine presence that will be there. The wisdom that she has, to me, makes me feel like, oh, I can do what I need to do with this baby and with God and be very okay in my decision in that. Because to me, personally, what feels good in this now moment is to have the presence of another woman there with her wisdom.
That's totally understandable.
Yeah.
And that's your choice. And that's what's best for you. Yeah.
And I'm really excited.
Yeah.
I've, been working. I'm still doing things like hypnobabies to prepare my mind and body to just release and change the language. I highly recommend women looking into who are pregnant or trying to get pregnant, wanting to have a family, look into hypnobabies because it's a all-encompassing birth education that really educates you on all sides of hospital birthing, because there are women who choose to still have a hospital birth and do hypnobirthing or hypnobabies, which is different than hypnobirthing. Still the same concept, but it's very all-encompassing in the fact that like you will learn what an epidural does to your body and what it does to your baby, and how natural birthing can be done, and really prepares your mind, body, and spirit for aligning to do so naturally. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, and you're gonna do great.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that rounds out all the questions. Is there anything else you want to end with?
No, thanks for having me on, and I know I'm awkward.
You're not. Stop. That's you need to stop questioning yourself so much still.
Yeah, I will openly say that I do that.
Well, I love you.
I love you very much. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.